Hi guys, tonight we step far back into the quiet dark, before cities, before writing, before the first road was pressed into the earth by wheels. A small fire burns at the mouth of a shelter. The air is cold, smoke moves slowly upward, carrying the smell of damp wood, animal hide, and stone warmed by flame. Around you, the night is wide and old. Somewhere beyond the glow, an animal calls once, then falls silent. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you settle in, tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what your local time is. Maybe it is midnight where you are. Maybe the first pale blue of morning is already touching your window. Now, dim the lights and let your eyes adjust to a world where almost everything is dark. You're sitting near a Paleolithic fire wrapped in a rough hide that still carries the faint scent of smoke, fat, and rain. The ground beneath you is uneven. Small stones press through the layer of grass and skins beneath your legs. The fire gives just enough warmth to keep the cold from becoming cruel, but not enough to make you forget where you are. The Ice Age world does not allow anyone to become too comfortable. That would be rude of it, really. Around you, the people of your small band sleep in loose circles. A child curls beside an older woman. A hunter breathes heavily with one arm across his chest. Someone shifts in their dreams, and the hide covering them rustles softly, like dry leaves. The flames crackle. Sparks rise and vanish. Beyond the shelter, the land stretches into darkness, full of river mist, frozen grass, distant trees, and the quiet patience of animals that have better night vision than you do. This is a human world, but only barely. For most of our species' history, people lived in small mobile groups, surviving by hunting, gathering, remembering, sharing, and moving with the seasons. Long before farming, long before kings, long before anyone complained about taxes in writing, humans depended on knowledge carried in bodies and minds. They knew which roots could be eaten, which tracks were fresh, which clouds meant cold rain, and which silence in the forest was not a peaceful silence at all. A mainstream historical fact is that Homo sapiens had already spread widely across Africa and beyond tens of thousands of years before the first cities appeared. For a very long time, human life was not built around monuments or markets, but around firelight, kinship, tools, memory, and the difficult art of staying alive one more day. And yet, as you sit here beside the fire, you begin to notice something strange. Humans are animals, of course. Warm-blooded, hungry, fragile, often confused animals. But they are also doing something unusual. They are not merely reacting to the world. They are filling it with meaning. The fire is not only heat, it is safety, it is gathering, it is story. The stone blade is not only a sharp edge, it is skill passed from hand to hand. The sleeping child is not only young life, the child is future memory, future language, future grief, future laughter. You look at the faces around the flames, and you sense the rare trait that scientists still circle around, carefully, patiently, like trackers studying footprints in soft mud. It is not one simple thing. It is not just intelligence. Other animals solve problems. It is not just tool use. Other animals use tools too, and some would probably roll their eyes if humans acted too impressed by themselves. It is not only language, though language matters deeply. It is not only imagination, though imagination burns everywhere here. It is the human habit of sharing inner worlds. You can look at another person and guess what they know. You can wonder what they feel. You can remember what someone told you yesterday. Imagine what might happen tomorrow, and shape your behavior around a story that exists only in minds. You can sit beside a fire and believe that the sparks rising into the dark mean something. You can teach a child about an animal that is not present. You can fear a winter that has not arrived. You can honor a dead person who no longer breathes. That is a very odd thing for an animal to do. Researchers continue to question exactly how and why this kind of symbolic, social, deeply imaginative mind emerged. Some emphasize language, others point to cooperation, long childhood, tool-making, fire, climate pressure, or the demands of living in groups where every glance could matter. The answer may not be one door opening, but many small doors, all creaking open across thousands of generations. You breathe in slowly, the air tastes of smoke and cold stone. Near the edge of the firelight, a person is awake. They are holding a piece of flint in one hand and turning it slowly, watching how the surface catches the glow. They are not striking it yet. They are studying it. Their fingers move over ridges and angles. Their face is calm, thoughtful, almost distant. Perhaps they're planning the next flake. Perhaps they are remembering the way an elder shaped stone earlier in the day. Perhaps they are imagining a tool before it exists. That small pause matters. A creature that can imagine a tool before making it is already living partly outside the present moment. You see the stone as it is. They see what it might become. A scraper, a blade, a point, a gift, a mistake. Possibly, because even ancient craftsmanship probably had its embarrassing little moments. The fire pops gently, and someone opens their eyes. For a moment, two people look at each other across the dim glow. No words are spoken. Still, something passes between them. Recognition, reassurance, maybe a question, maybe the quiet message that the night is safe enough for now. Modern life often hides how astonishing this is. Today, you can send a message across oceans, share a photograph, watch someone's face through a screen, and order dinner without speaking to another human being. Very advanced, very convenient, also slightly strange when you think about it too long at night. But here, in this older world, every shared meaning must travel through voice, gesture, expression, memory, and touch. A raised hand, a softened face, a warning sound, a laugh in the dark, a story repeated until a child remembers where the river bends. The rare human trait is not only that you think, it is that you can think together. That togetherness is fragile, needs trust, it needs attention, it needs the ability to imagine another mind sitting behind another pair of eyes. You watch the sleeping band and realize that each person carries an invisible world inside them. Memories of hunger, paths through forests, the face of a mother, the shape of a mammoth track, the sound of ice cracking near a riverbank, the warmth of a hand held during illness. None of these things can be seen directly, yet the group depends on them. A lesser-known tidbit is that some ancient human sites show evidence of pigments, ornaments, and carefully shaped objects that were not merely practical. Ochre pieces, beads, and engraved marks suggest that early humans were not only surviving, but also decorating, signaling, remembering, and perhaps marking identity. In other words, even in a hard world, they made room for meaning. Apparently, humans looked at the brutal ice age and thought, yes, but what if we added jewelry? The thought is almost funny. It is also deeply moving. You shift closer to the fire. Heat touches your knees. Your back remains cold. Above you, the sky is crowded with stars, far brighter than the sky most people know now. No city light softens them. No glass window separates you from them. The Milky Way lies across the dark like pale dust spilled by an invisible hand. You look upward and wonder whether someone here has named those lights, maybe not in words you would recognize, maybe not as stars in the modern sense, but perhaps as ancestors, sparks, eyes, paths, fires, animals, or signs. The human mind reaches for pattern the way the body reaches for warmth. It wants the world to speak back. And this, perhaps, is where the mystery begins. You're not standing at the edge of civilization yet. You're standing much earlier, at the edge of something quieter and harder to define. A mind that can turn survival into story. A hand that can turn stone into intention. A face that can read another face in firelight. A group that can carry knowledge beyond one lifetime. The night deepens. The fire lowers. The person with the flint finally strikes the stone, and a small sharp flake drops into their palm. No one cheers, no one writes it down, but in the hush of the ancient dark something human has happened, and you remain beside the fire listening as the first shape of the mystery glows softly in the hands of people who do not yet know how rare they are. You stay beside the same low fire as the night slowly thins, and before the sun rises, you begin to notice how quiet communication can be. No one here has a school, a book, a calendar, or a neat little app that reminds them what to do next. Very inconvenient, honestly. And yet the group is not confused. They know when to move, when to wait, when to gather wood, when to keep children close, and when to listen carefully to the land. This knowledge does not float in the air by magic. It passes from person to person, before writing, before maps, before carved laws or painted symbols on walls. Human beings depended on shared attention. Someone looked toward the river, and others followed their gaze. Someone pointed to tracks in soft mud, and a child leaned closer. Someone made a low sound, and the group understood that the animal ahead was not close enough to fear, but close enough to respect. You rise slowly from the sleeping place. Cold enters through the hide around your shoulders. The ground is damp beneath your feet. A pale mist lies over the valley, turning bushes and stones into soft grey shapes. The fire behind you gives one last orange glow, and the sky above the eastern ridge begins to loosen from black into blue. Around you, the camp wakes without a bell. A woman scrapes ash from the fire pit with a branch. An older man checks a bundle of tools wrapped in skin. Two children whisper, then stop when a nearby adult gives them a look that says, "Not yet." No lecture needed. No long argument before breakfast. Just a look, and the little storm of noise fades. In early human life, this kind of silent understanding mattered. A mainstream historical fact is that long before writing systems appeared, humans transmitted knowledge through speech, gesture, imitation, and repeated practice. Children learned by watching adults work, by copying movements, and by being corrected in small ways over many years. You walk toward the river with a small group. The air smells of wet grass, cold stone, and smoke still clinging to your hair. A bird calls from the trees, then another answers. Water runs over pebbles with that soft, steady sound that seems older than memory itself. One of the adults crouches beside the mud near the bank. You crouch too. There are marks there. Not random marks, hoof prints, pressed deep, broken reeds, a place where the mud has been disturbed by weight. The adult points with 2 fingers, then they touch the edge of one print and glance at the trees. You understand something, but not all of it. A herd passed here, perhaps recently, perhaps before dawn. The direction matters. The softness of the mud matters. The bent grass matters. The silence beyond the river matters. This is language before full explanation. The world is being translated through hands, and you might wonder, when did simple signs become something more? When did a gesture toward tracks become a story about where animals go in winter, or a warning about a dangerous crossing, or a memory of the day someone was injured near this same bend in the water? Researchers remain divided on exactly when complex spoken language became fully modern. Some argue that speech developed gradually across earlier human ancestors. Others suggest that symbolic language expanded more dramatically among Homo sapiens as social life, tool-making, and long-distance cooperation became more demanding. The soft truth is that language leaves very few fossils. Words vanish into air. They do not sit politely in the ground, waiting for archaeologists to brush them clean. Still, the traces are everywhere as you see them in planning. You see them in teaching. You see them in the careful way people coordinate without confusion. The group turns back from the river, moving toward a patch of trees where dry branches may still be found under thicker cover. The morning grows brighter, but the cold remains. Your fingers ache slightly. The hide across your shoulders is stiff from old dampness. Someone behind you coughs once. Someone ahead breaks a twig underfoot, and the sound snaps sharply in the quiet. A child walks near an older woman, trying to copy her steps. The woman moves slowly and deliberately, placing her feet where the ground is firmer. The child watches, then imitates her. Step, pause, step. This is not dramatic. No one gives a speech about proper walking technique in Ice Age terrain. Thankfully. But the lesson is happening all the same. Human childhood is filled with this kind of learning. The body watches before the mouth understands. The eyes gather patterns. The hands attempt what they have seen. The mind slowly builds a bridge between another person's action and its own. Shared attention is one of the quiet miracles of human life. You can look where another person looks. You can understand that they are seeing something. You can understand that they want you to see it too. That sounds simple because you have lived with it all your life. But it is a rare and powerful ability. It lets knowledge move from one mind into many minds. It lets a discovery survive the person who first made it. It lets a child know about danger without meeting it directly, which is honestly one of the better arrangements nature has allowed. By midday, the group returns with wood, roots, and a few small finds gathered from the edge of the trees. Smoke rises again from the camp. Someone breaks open a nut with a stone. Someone else twists plant fibers into a rough cord. The work is quiet, repetitive, and full of tiny signals. A hand offered, a nod refused, a sound of approval, a soft click of the tongue when a child reaches too close to a sharp flake. Before words became worlds, they may have begun as these small bridges between bodies, a warning, a request, a name, a direction, a memory. Then, slowly, something widened. Sounds could refer to things not present, a place beyond the hill, a season not yet here, a person who had died, an animal seen yesterday, a plan for tomorrow. This is where the human mind becomes strange again. You can speak of absence. You can share what is not in front of you. You can gather around a fire and talk about a valley no one can currently see, but everyone can imagine. A quirky tidbit from studies of ancient communication is that some researchers look not only at skulls and tools, but also at the tiny bones and nerves involved in breath control, hearing, and speech. Even the shape of the vocal tract and the control of breathing become part of the mystery. Apparently, to tell a good fireside story, your ribs, tongue, ears, and brain all have to cooperate. Rather demanding, but humans do love making things complicated. Evening returns gently. The day's light lowers behind the ridge. Shadows stretch across the camp. A child brings a piece of wood to the fire and receives a smile. Someone begins to speak in a low voice. You do not know every sound, but you feel the rhythm. The others listen. Their faces turn toward the speaker. Their eyes shine in the firelight. Maybe it is instruction. Maybe it is memory. Maybe it is a tale shaped from both. The speaker lifts a hand and traces a line in the air, showing the curve of a river or the movement of an animal. Another person makes a brief sound of agreement. The children lean closer, their bodies still now, their attention gathered like warmth. This is not writing, but it preserves. This is not a school, but it teaches. This is not a temple, but meaning is present. As the stars appear, you realize that words do more than describe the world. They create a shared world inside the group, a place made of memory, warning, hope, and imagination, a place where one mind can meet another without touching it. The fire settles lower. The voice continues softly, and in the dark before history, before any name is carved into stone. You listen as human meaning begins to move from breath to breath. Morning comes with a thin layer of frost across the grass. The camp is already stirring when you open your eyes. A pale light spreads across the valley. Smoke rises from the fire pit in a slow grey column, carrying the familiar scent of ash and damp wood. Someone nearby is sharpening a stone edge. The sharp clicking sound travels through the cool air, steady and patient. Click, pause, click, pause. The rhythm feels almost comforting. You sit up and pull a hide closer around your shoulders. The cold brushes your face. Your hands feel stiff. Across the camp, a woman kneels beside a collection of stones spread neatly on a flat patch of earth. Nearby, a young boy watches with complete concentration, as though observing the most important event in the world. In a way, he is. The history of humanity is often told through grand ideas: language, art, migration, agriculture. But before many of those developments, there were hands that learned to grip, hands that learned to shape, hands that learned to pass knowledge from one generation to the next. You walk closer. The woman selects a piece of flint and turns it carefully beneath the morning light. Her fingers move across the stone as though reading it. Every ridge matters, every angle matters. Then she lifts another stone and strikes. A flake breaks free. Not randomly, not accidentally, exactly where she intended. The boy's eyes widen slightly. No words are needed, he has just witnessed expertise. A mainstream historical fact is that stone tool-making was one of the defining skills of prehistoric humanity. For hundreds of thousands of years, humans and their ancestors created increasingly sophisticated tools from stone, bone, antler, and wood. These tools allowed people to process food, prepare hides, shape weapons, and adapt to environments across vast regions of the world. At first glance, shaping a stone may seem simple. Take rock, hit rock, get sharp rock, problem solved. But the reality is much more impressive. Toolmaking requires planning. The maker must imagine the final shape before it exists. They must understand how the stone will fracture. They must control force, angle, timing, and sequence. One mistake can ruin hours of effort. In other words, the tool exists in the mind before it exists in the hand. That is where things become fascinating. You sit nearby and watch more closely. The woman's fingers adjust constantly. Tiny movements, barely visible corrections. Her thumb steadies the stone. Her wrist shifts. Her grip changes by fractions. Each movement reflects years of experience, and human hands are unusually suited to this kind of work. You glance down at your own hands, 5 fingers, flexible joints, sensitive fingertips. A thumb that can press firmly against the other fingers, Nothing about them seems remarkable because you have lived with them your entire life. Yet compared with many other animals, human hands are extraordinary tools. The combination of strength and precision allows you to thread a needle, carve wood, paint a picture, play a musical instrument, or carefully remove a splinter. The same structure that lets a prehistoric hunter shape flint also lets a modern surgeon perform delicate operations. The basic design remains surprisingly similar. You flex your fingers. The movement feels effortless. But beneath the skin lies an intricate system of bones, tendons, muscles, nerves, and sensory receptors working together with astonishing coordination. Some researchers suggest that advanced hand control played a major role in shaping the human brain itself. Others argue that growing intelligence allowed increasingly complex tool use. The debate continues because both processes may have influenced each other over immense stretches of time. Which came first, the clever brain or the skilled hand? Scientists continue to explore the question. Perhaps they grew together, like dance partners teaching each other new steps. The morning passes slowly, the camp becomes busier, children gather kindling, adults inspect hunting equipment. Someone repairs a hide covering torn during travel. Everywhere you look, hands are working, pulling, twisting, tying, carving, holding, pointing, comforting, teaching. You begin noticing something else. Humans rarely use their hands alone. Hands and minds operate as a partnership. The woman teaching the boy is not merely demonstrating movements. She is transferring an invisible skill. The boy watches. Then he tries. His first strike produces an awkward result. A chunk breaks away in the wrong direction. Nobody laughs. The woman simply adjusts his grip. He tries again. Another mistake. Then another. Eventually a small flake separates cleanly. His face brightens. A tiny success. A tiny piece of knowledge crossing from one mind into another. You might think of modern classrooms, online tutorials, instruction manuals, and educational videos. Yet for most of human history, learning happened exactly like this. One person watching another. One pair of hands guiding another pair. Knowledge passed physically through observation. A lesser-known archaeological discovery is that researchers can sometimes identify apprentice toolmakers in prehistoric sites. Certain stone tools show patterns of mistakes consistent with inexperienced hands. Scattered among expertly crafted tools are imperfect attempts that suggest younger learners practicing under the supervision of skilled adults. Even tens of thousands of years later, those mistakes remain preserved. Ancient homework, you could say. The thought makes you smile. Somewhere in the distant past, a young learner probably sighed after ruining a perfectly good piece of flint. Some experiences truly are timeless. As afternoon arrives, clouds drift slowly across the sky. The wind carries the scent of pine and damp earth. A few members of the group prepare for a short hunting trip. Others remain behind. The social world of early humans required flexibility. Not everyone performed the same tasks all the time. Skills varied, experience varied, age mattered, knowledge mattered, and throughout it all, hands remained central. You watch an older man repairing a spear. His movements are slower than those of the younger hunters. His fingers show signs of wear. Small scars cross his knuckles. The joints appear stiff. Yet the younger people occasionally approach him with questions. Why? Because experience lives in those hands. The spear shaft rotates slowly between his fingers. He examines every detail, then offers advice, not because he is strongest, not because he is fastest, because he remembers. Memory itself often becomes physical. A lifetime of practice leaves traces in the body. The way someone grips a tool, the way they stand, the way they anticipate problems before they appear. Researchers remain divided on exactly how specialized labor became in prehistoric societies. Some evidence suggests flexible roles with broad skill sharing. Other evidence hints at individuals developing particular expertise in certain crafts or activities. The picture likely varied across different groups and different times, but expertise clearly mattered. The camp begins preparing for evening. The light softens. Golden sunlight touches the tops of distant trees. Children return carrying bundles of sticks. The fire grows stronger. Smoke drifts upward into the cooling air. You settle beside the flames once more. The familiar warmth reaches your face. Nearby, the young boy from the morning still holds a piece of flint. He turns it over carefully, studying, imagining, planning. The same expression you saw earlier now appears on his face. Not because he has mastered the skill, far from it, but because he has begun to see possibilities inside the stone. That may be one of the most important moments in human history. Not a completed tool, not a successful hunt, not even a great discovery, a possibility. The ability to look at something ordinary and imagine something that does not yet exist. The stone becomes a future blade. The branch becomes a spear. The hide becomes clothing. The idea becomes reality. Human hands make these transformations visible, yet the process begins somewhere deeper. Within the mind, within imagination, within the mysterious partnership between thought and action that scientists still struggle to fully explain. The fire crackles softly. Night gathers around the camp. A child laughs. Someone adds another log to the flames. And as sparks rise into the darkening sky, you watch ancient hands continue their quiet work, shaping not only stone, but the future of humanity itself. The next morning is softer, warmer, and filled with a pale mist that hangs low over the ground. You wake to the sound of quiet movement around the shelter. Someone is feeding the fire with thin sticks. Someone else is shaking frost from a hide. The smoke smells bitter today, damp from wood that didn't dry properly during the night. It drifts sideways and makes a child rub their eyes with the back of one small hand. You sit up slowly. Across the camp, faces begin appearing in the grey light. Sleepy faces, hungry faces, watchful faces. A young woman looks toward the trees with narrowed eyes. An older man studies the sky. Two children stare at each other, trying not to laugh too loudly before the adults are fully awake. Near the fire, the boy who practiced with flint yesterday holds his new little flake with obvious pride. Although he is trying very hard to look calm about it, he is failing, sweetly. His face gives him away. And that is where today's mystery begins. Before humans built villages, before they painted caves, before they planted fields or raised animals, they lived in small groups where every expression mattered. A look could warn of danger, a smile could soften tension. A lifted brow could ask a question. A tightened mouth could mean anger, pain, suspicion, or simply that breakfast was disappointing, which is also historically important in its own quiet way. Evidence from studies of human evolution suggests that face reading became deeply important in social life. Humans are intensely visual social creatures. We notice eyes, mouths, posture, tone, and tiny changes in expression. Much of this happens before we consciously think about it. You rise and step into the morning air. The ground is cold beneath your feet. The smell of wet grass rises as the sun begins touching the valley. A few members of the group prepare to move toward a wooded slope, where they hope to find edible plants, dry branches, and signs of animals. No one announces a meeting. No one clears their throat and says, "Good morning, everyone. Here is today's survival agenda." That would be very organized, and therefore suspiciously modern. Instead, the group gathers through glances. One person looks toward the slope, another nods, a third checks the children, someone adjusts a spear point, someone else studies the wind. Little by little, a plan forms through faces and gestures. You walk with them through tall grass silvered with dew. The morning light catches on spiderwebs stretched between low shrubs. Birds move quietly through the trees. Somewhere ahead, branches creak in the breeze, or perhaps under the weight of something moving. The group slows. You feel the change before anyone speaks. Shoulders tighten, heads lift. Eyes turn toward the same dark place between the trees. A woman raises her hand. Everyone stops. You look at her face. It is not panic. It is focus. Her lips are slightly parted. Her brow is still. Her gaze is fixed ahead. The children understand. They move closer to the adults. Nothing dramatic has happened, yet everyone has changed. This is the power of shared emotional reading in a world without written warnings, alarms, fences, or a nice little sign saying danger. Please do not enter. The human face becomes an early warning system. It carries information faster than speech. Fear can move through a group before anyone has time to explain why. Not everyone agrees on the full explanation for why humans became so skilled at reading faces. Some specialists argue that it grew from the demands of cooperation, because group survival depended on knowing who was trustworthy, frightened, angry, or willing to help. Others emphasize parenting, since human infants and children require long care and constant emotional attention. Still others point to competition within groups, where reading intentions could protect a person from conflict. Perhaps all of these are true. Human life is rarely polite enough to have one simple cause. The sound comes again. A soft crack, then silence. After a long moment, an older hunter gives a small breath through his nose and lowers his shoulders. His face relaxes. The others notice. The tension loosens. A deer steps briefly between the trees, then disappears. No danger, only movement. The group exhales together, almost as one body. You continue walking, but now you pay closer attention to faces. The older woman who teaches the children keeps her expression calm even when the path becomes difficult. A younger man hides frustration when his foot slips in mud. A child watches him and copies his attempt at dignity, which is brave, unnecessary, and very human. By midday, the group rests near a patch of trees. The sun warms the bark. The air smells of leaves, damp soil, and crushed plants. Someone digs carefully near the roots of a shrub. Someone else breaks open a piece of wood to look for insects. A child finds a smooth stone and offers it to an adult as if presenting rare treasure. The adult smiles. The child beams. There it is again. A whole relationship glowing in the space between two faces. One fascinating clue about human faces is the unusual visibility of the whites of our eyes. Compared with many other primates, human eyes make gaze direction easier to see. This may help people follow what others are looking at, sharing attention quickly and silently. So when someone says the eyes are the window to the soul, that is poetic. Yes, but also faintly anatomical. Very efficient of the soul to use such clear signage. You sit in the shade and watch the others. A woman touches a scratch on her arm and winces. Someone beside her notices and quietly passes a strip of hide. A man glances toward the sky, then toward the distance, judging time and weather. A child looks from one adult to another, trying to understand whether the day is safe, whether the group is relaxed, whether play is allowed. Children are experts at reading the emotional weather of adults. They have always needed to be. In a prehistoric camp, a child who could sense tension, danger, approval, or warning had an advantage. They learned not only through direct instruction, but through watching the faces of those who knew more than they did. And perhaps adults learned from children too. A crying infant, a frightened child, a curious gaze, a tired face. These small signals pulled care from others. They shaped attention. They helped bind the group together. As afternoon lowers into evening, you return toward the camp. The fire is rebuilt. Shadows lengthen across the ground. The group settles into its familiar pattern of repair, sorting, eating, and rest. But tonight there is a small disagreement near the fire. Nothing violent, nothing loud, just two adults, both tired, both wanting the same tool bundle. Their voices are low, their faces tighten. The others notice without staring directly, because apparently social awkwardness is also ancient. One person looks away. Another quietly moves a child farther from the exchange. An older woman watches both faces carefully. Then she speaks, very softly. The tone changes. The two adults pause. One gives a brief, reluctant smile. The other exhales. The tension does not vanish completely, but it becomes smaller, manageable, human. This too is survival. Not every threat has teeth in the dark. Some threats begin inside the group. Anger, jealousy, mistrust, fear, hunger, fatigue. Humans had to manage one another as carefully as they managed fire. The exact role of facial expression in early human cooperation remains difficult to reconstruct. Soft tissues do not fossilize neatly, and ancient emotions do not leave footprints in mud. Yet comparative studies, infant development, and the structure of human social life all suggest that reading faces was not a decorative skill. It was central. The fire grows brighter as night settles. You sit beside it and look from face to face. The boy with the flint flake has fallen asleep, one hand still curled around his small stone prize. The older woman watches the flames. A hunter stares into the dark beyond camp. A mother lowers her face to her child's hair and closes her eyes for a moment. No one says much, but the faces are speaking. Weariness, trust, memory, care, a little worry, a little warmth. And as you sit in the hush of the ancient evening, you understand that the rare human trait is not only hidden deep in the brain, it lives on the surface too, in the moving skin around the eyes, in the corners of the mouth, in the silent messages passing through firelight. Before written language, before cities, before history had pages, humans were already reading one another, and under the cold stars, that may have helped them survive. The evening after the small disagreement settles into a gentler silence. You remain near the fire as the group drifts back into its familiar rhythm. Someone turns a strip of meat over the heat. Someone rubs animal fat into a cracked hide to soften it. The children, released from the seriousness of adult tension, return to quiet play near the edge of the light. The air's cool but not bitter. Smoke moves upward in slow ribbons. The smell of roasted food, ash, damp woolly hide, and crushed grass gathers around the shelter. Above you, the first stars appear, faint at first, then sharper as the sky deepens. You look across the fire and notice the young boy with the flint flake. He is awake again, sitting close to the older woman who taught him. His little stone tool rests in his lap. Earlier, he was proud. Now he is watching the adults carefully, as if still replaying the disagreement in his mind. The older woman says something softly to him. You do not know the words, but you know the feeling. Reassurance. The boy looks down. Then, quite suddenly, his face changes. A flush rises across his cheeks. It is brief, warm, almost hidden by the firelight, but you see it. He is embarrassed. Perhaps she teased him gently. Perhaps she mentioned his pride. Perhaps someone noticed how carefully he has guarded that small imperfect flake all day. The adults smile, not unkindly. The boy looks away, shoulders lifting slightly, cheeks still warm, and here, in this tiny moment, another rare human mystery appears. Blushing. Such a small thing. Such a strange thing. A visible confession of feeling, painted by the body before the mind can politely object. Studies of human biology show that blushing is linked to the widening of blood vessels in the face, often triggered by embarrassment, shame, attention, or emotional exposure. It is not something most people can easily control. The body simply announces, yes, something is happening inside me. Thank you very much. Very discreet. Except it is not discreet at all. You sit quietly, feeling the fire warm your own skin. Among many human traits, blushing seems especially odd because it can reveal vulnerability. If a person is embarrassed, why would the body show it? Why would evolution allow such a public signal? In a harsh world of cold nights and hungry predators, flushed cheeks seem almost too delicate to matter. Yet social life has its own weather. In a group where survival depends on cooperation, a visible sign of regret, modesty, or emotional sincerity may help repair trust. A blush can say what words cannot yet say clearly. I know you saw me. I know I made a mistake. I care what you think. That is a surprisingly useful message. The boy shifts close to the older woman, still pretending he's not pleased by the attention. One adult chuckles softly. Another reaches over and taps the flint flake with one finger, admiring it. The boy's blush deepens, then fades. No one mocks him harshly. The moment passes like smoke. But you remember it. The explanation for blushing remains uncertain among scientists. Some researchers suggest it evolved as an honest social signal because it is difficult to fake. Others think it may be a byproduct of emotional arousal and facial blood flow, later shaped by social meaning. A few point out that blushing is most powerful in communities where reputation matters, and reputation has always mattered very much to humans. After all, they're in a small Paleolithic band. There is no moving to another city because you embarrassed yourself at dinner. Everyone knows. Everyone remembers. Forever. Probably. The thought is gently horrifying. Modern life still carries this ancient discomfort. You say the wrong thing in a meeting where you trip on a perfectly flat floor. You wave back at someone who was not waving at you. And suddenly your face warms as if your ancestors have gathered around an invisible campfire to say, "We have prepared this response for you. Very helpful, very unnecessary. But maybe it is not useless. Maybe the blush softens the world. A person who blushes seems less threatening, more sincere, more aware of the group. It can invite forgiveness. It can reduce anger. It can turn a mistake into something human rather than hostile." Near the fire, an older hunter begins telling a story. His voice is low and rough. The others listen while working with their hands. The story seems to involve a past mistake, because several people smile before he reaches the end. He gestures toward himself, then toward the trees, then slaps his own thigh with theatrical regret. The group laughs quietly, not loudly, not sharply, a warm laugh contained by the night. Then, for a brief moment, even the older hunter's face reddens. He looks away, smiling. So it is not only children. Even those with scars, skill, and long memory can still be caught by the body's little flame of embarrassment. An overlooked detail in the history of emotion is that ancient people almost certainly felt many of the same social discomforts we do today. Even though they lived in worlds without offices, text messages, school photographs, or accidentally sending a message to the wrong group chat, the settings change. The nervous system remains loyal to its older habits. You look at the faces around you. The fire brings out warm colours in the skin. Shadows move over brows and cheekbones. Eyes shine in the dim light. The body is constantly speaking through posture, breath, stillness, touch, and heat. Blushing belongs to this silent language. It is not a tool like flint, not a word like a warning, not a story like those carried from fire to fire. It is more private than that, yet visible. A bridge between inner feeling and outer group life. As the night grows colder, someone adds thicker wood to the fire, sparks lift into the darkness. The air smells sharper now, tinged with frost. A hide is passed to an older woman whose shoulders have begun to tremble. She accepts it with a nod. Across the circle, the young boy finally places his flint flake beside him and lets his head rest against her arm. His face is calm again. The blush is gone. But the group has absorbed its meaning. He's learning not only stonework, not only tracks, not only the shape of edible roots or the sound of danger in the brush. He is learning how to be seen by others and remain among them. That may be one of the deepest lessons of human life. To live with people is to be known, sometimes kindly, sometimes awkwardly, sometimes far too clearly. The fire lowers. The storyteller's voice becomes slower. A child yawns. Someone at the edge of the shelter pulls a hide tighter against the cold. You feel your own face warmed by the flames and imagine how many human beings, across thousands of generations, have sat in circles like this, exposed not only to weather and hunger, but to one another, to glances, to laughter, to correction, to forgiveness, to the strange mercy of being embarrassed and accepted anyway. And as the ancient night settles around the camp, the mystery of blushing no longer feels small. It feels like a tiny red spark from the larger fire of human social life, a sign that the body remembers how much we need each other. Before dawn, the camp begins to move, not all at once, not with shouting or hurry, just a slow waking of bodies in the dark, a quiet gathering of tools, hides, food scraps, and memory. The fire is low, glowing red beneath grey ash. Someone breathes gently on the coals until a small orange pulse returns, then feeds it with a twist of dry grass. The air is cold enough to sting your nose. You pull your covering closer and stand. For a moment, your legs feel heavy beneath you. The ground is hard with frost. The stars are still bright overhead, scattered across the sky like pale seeds. Far away, beyond the valley, the dark outline of hills waits beneath the first faint wash of morning. Today, the group will walk. That sounds simple. It is not. For ancient humans, movement shaped everything. Where food could be found, where water ran clear, where animals crossed, where shelter waited, where danger gathered, long before roads, shoes with soft foam, or little maps that politely tell you to turn left in 200 meters. People carried their lives across landscapes on their own feet. Your feet touch the ground, cold, rough, uneven. The group moves away from the shelter as the sky begins to pale. Children stay near adults. Hunters carry spears. Someone balances a bundle across one shoulder. Another person carries embers protected in a nest of bark and ash, because fire is too valuable to abandon casually. You follow them into the open land. Grass brushes your legs. Frost snaps underfoot. The river lies silver in the distance, half hidden by mist. Each step sends a quiet message through your body, from heel to hip, from spine to breath. Walking upright feels ordinary to you, but it is one of the great transformations in human evolution. Fossil evidence points toward bipedal walking appearing in early hominins millions of years before modern humans existed. Long before large brains became the signature human feature, our ancestors were already changing the way they moved through the world. Hips, knees, feet, spines, and skulls gradually shifted around this new arrangement, a body balanced on two legs, hands freed from the ground. It was not a perfect design. You feel that after the first long stretch. Your lower back complains quietly. Your feet find every sharp pebble in the valley. Your knees seem willing, but not exactly enthusiastic. Human upright walking is efficient over long distances, but it comes with compromises, back pain, difficult childbirth, vulnerable knees, and a spine that sometimes acts like it was assembled late in the evening by a tired apprentice. Still, the benefits were enormous. Standing upright allowed early humans and their ancestors to see over grass, carry food, hold tools, gather children, move through heat more efficiently, and travel long distances across shifting environments. You climb a gentle slope behind the others. The morning sun touches the ridge. Your shadow stretches behind you, long and thin on the frosted ground. A child ahead stumbles, catches themselves, then keeps going. An older adult slows slightly, leaning on a wooden staff polished by long use. This is not a dramatic migration. It is daily survival, a careful crossing from one known place to another. The exact reasons bipedalism evolved remain under discussion. Some researchers emphasize energy saving during long travel. Others point to carrying food or infants, reaching for fruit, moving through mixed woodland and grassland, or staying cooler under the sun. Several possibilities may have worked together because evolution rarely behaves like a tidy classroom answer. As you walk, you notice how upright movement changes the social world. Because hands are free, people carry more than their own bodies. A woman carries a sleeping child against her chest, wrapped in hide. A young man carries tools. Another person carries gathered food from the previous day. Someone carries a memory of the safe crossing ahead and guides the group toward it. Upright walking is not only locomotion, it is transportation of objects, children, fire, and knowledge. The path descends toward a river crossing. Stones break the surface of the water, slick and dark. The current is not strong, but it is cold. Very cold. The kind of cold that seems to have personal opinions about your ankles. One by one, the group crosses. An adult steps first, testing each stone. Another helps the children. Hands reach, bodies lean. Balance matters. Trust matters. A wrong step could mean a soaked hide, a bruised knee, or worse if winter deepens. You place your foot on the first stone. It shifts slightly. Your arms lift without thought. There it is again. The ancient balance of the upright body. The hips adjust. The spine corrects. The toes grip. You move forward slowly, feeling every muscle join the conversation. On the far bank, the ground is softer. Mud clings to your feet. The smell of wet earth rises sharply. A flock of birds scatters from reeds nearby, wings beating the morning air. The group pauses. Someone checks the carried embers. Still alive. A small success. A small future fire. One surprising detail from studies of ancient footprints is that tracks can preserve moments that bones cannot. At sites such as Latoli in Tanzania, much older hominin footprints show upright, walking across volcanic ash. Other later footprint sites preserve group movement, pace, body size, and sometimes the presence of children. Footprints are intimate in a way bones are not. They show someone passing through a day, step by step, not knowing the ground would remember them. You look behind you at your own tracks in the mud. They fill slowly with water. Soon they will vanish. Most human lives do. And yet, for thousands upon thousands of years, human beings kept walking across grasslands, through forests, along coasts, over frozen ground, into deserts, beside rivers, under stars. The afternoon brings a colder wind from the hills. The group shelters for a while among low trees. Someone breaks dry branches. Someone checks a child's feet. The older adult with the staff sits on a stone and rubs one knee, quietly, with no ceremony. Pain is part of the journey, but so is endurance. You sit nearby and feel the tired warmth in your own legs. Walking has changed the mood of the group. People speak less. Breath matters more. The rhythm of steps has made everyone inward and calm. Even children are quieter now, lulled by motion and fatigue. Modern life often separates people from long walking, cars, trains, elevators, escalators, delivery services, rolling chairs, all very convenient. And honestly, some days the chair deserves our gratitude. But for most of human history, distance was physical. To know a place, you walked it. To survive a season, you crossed it. To remember a landscape, you felt it through your souls. By evening, the group reaches a sheltered hollow near a stand of trees. The wind is weaker here. The river can still be heard faintly behind you, a soft thread of sound through the darkening land. A new fire is built from the protected embers. Smoke rises, then steadies. Someone laughs quietly when the flame catches, as if greeting an old friend who has arrived a little late. You lower yourself beside the warmth. Your legs ache. Your feet are sore. Your back is grateful for stillness. Around you, people settle with the deep tiredness of bodies that have carried themselves honestly through the day. The child who stumbled earlier sleeps quickly. The older adult rests both hands on the staff. The hunters place their spears within reach. Above, stars appear again. You think of all the upright bodies that crossed landscapes before this one, not famous, not named, not remembered individually, but necessary. Every step part of a long chain leading toward you. Walking upright did not make humans invincible. It made them mobile. It made them carrying creatures. It freed the hands, burdened the spine, widened the world, and turned distance into something the group could slowly, patiently overcome. The fire crackles. The wind moves through the trees and under the cold stars. You feel the ancient human body at rest after walking, balanced between weakness and wonder, still carrying the mystery forward on two tired feet. The fire has burned low again by the time you wake. Only a few glowing embers remain beneath a blanket of ash. The camp is quiet. Even the wind seems reluctant to disturb the morning. Above, the sky is a pale grey-blue, and the first light spreads slowly across the tops of distant trees. You remain wrapped in your hide for a few moments, listening. A bird calls somewhere nearby. Water trickles over stone. A child murmurs in sleep. Then another child answers with a sleepy sound of their own. The adults remain mostly silent. The children do not. And that, perhaps, is one of the most remarkable things about being human. For most animals, infancy passes quickly. A foal can stand within hours. A young deer learns to run almost immediately. Many creatures enter the world with abilities that would seem miraculous to a human parent who has spent 3 sleepless nights trying to convince a baby that 2 a.m. is not the ideal time to begin a personal concert. Human children are different. Extraordinarily different. You sit up and watch as the camp slowly wakes around you. One little girl stumbles out from beneath a hide covering. Her hair sticks in every possible direction. She blinks at the morning light, then immediately begins asking questions. Not with modern words, perhaps, but with sounds, gestures, pointing, looking, wondering. The world is still new to her. Everything demands investigation. Why is that bird there? What is that smell? Who moved the pile of wood? Can I touch that? Should I touch that? The answer to the last question is often no. Fortunately, curiosity rarely waits for permission. The archaeological and biological evidence paints a striking picture. Human children spend far longer developing than the young of most other species. Compared with other primates, our childhood is unusually extended. We remain dependent on adults for many years, requiring food, protection, teaching, and emotional care. At first glance, this seems like a terrible evolutionary strategy. A helpless infant requires enormous effort. A helpless toddler requires even more effort. A group filled with children moves more slowly, makes more noise, and constantly tries to investigate objects that absolutely should not be investigated. And yet humans succeeded. Something about this long childhood proved valuable. You watch a small boy attempting to imitate an older hunter. The hunter is carefully repairing a spear shaft. The boy has found a stick. His stick is not a spear. His technique is not excellent. But his enthusiasm is extraordinary. Every movement of the adult is copied. The grip, the posture, the expression, the concentration. You can almost see learning taking place. Not instantly, not dramatically, just slowly, like water filling a hollow in stone. Across the camp, another child follows an older woman gathering plants. Every few steps the woman pauses, pointing toward leaves, roots, berries, and stems. The child watches carefully. Sometimes she repeats the gesture. Sometimes she forgets and becomes distracted by a beetle crawling across a rock. Learning, it turns out, is not always a straight line. One conclusion supported by research across anthropology, psychology, and evolutionary biology is that humans are exceptional learners. Our long childhood provides time to absorb enormous amounts of information about language, social rules, tools, plants, animals, landscapes, emotions, and relationships. The cost is dependence. The reward is flexibility. A wolf pup grows into a wolf. A human child can grow into almost anything. Hunter, gatherer, toolmaker, artist, storyteller, farmer, sailor, scientist, teacher. The possibilities are unusually broad. The morning grows warmer as sunlight spreads through the trees. Dew evaporates from the grass. The scent of earth rises into the air. Someone feeds fresh branches into the fire. Smoke drifts upward and carries the smell of pine resin through the camp. The children remain busy. One gathers pebbles. One chases a grasshopper. One invents a game whose rules appear to change every 30 seconds. Remarkably, the others still manage to play it. You begin noticing something important. The children are not merely being protected. They are practicing. When they play, they are learning balance, coordination, communication, negotiation, cooperation, and imagination. A pretend hunt may look like simple entertainment, yet hidden inside the game are skills that will eventually matter. A small but fascinating detail comes from studies of traditional hunter-gatherer societies. Researchers have often observed children spending large amounts of time in mixed-age groups, learning not only from parents but also from older siblings, cousins, grandparents, and unrelated adults. Knowledge flows through entire communities rather than through a single teacher. The arrangement makes sense. Raising a human child is demanding work. Raising many human children would be nearly impossible alone. As midday approaches, several adults leave to gather food while others remain behind. The camp becomes quieter. An elderly woman sits near the fire, surrounded by 3 children. She tells them something, perhaps a memory, perhaps a lesson, perhaps a story that combines both. The children listen with varying levels of commitment. One is completely absorbed. One occasionally looks at birds. One pokes a stick into the dirt while pretending to pay attention. Some educational traditions are apparently timeless. You settle nearby and watch. The old woman points toward the hills, then toward the river, then toward the sky. The children follow her gestures. She is transferring information, not through books, not through writing, through attention, through repetition, through shared experience. This may be one reason long childhood became so important. Human knowledge eventually grew too large to be inherited through instinct alone. Each generation had to learn from the previous one. A bird knows how to build a nest largely through inherited behavior. A human must learn how to build almost everything: shelters, tools, language, customs, stories, relationships, meaning. The mystery becomes even more interesting when scientists try to determine exactly why human childhood expanded so dramatically. Some theories emphasize larger brains, which require more time to develop. Others focus on increasingly complex social environments. Still others highlight the growing amount of knowledge children needed to acquire before becoming fully independent. The evidence likely points towards several forces working together across immense spans of time. By late afternoon, the camp is filled with gentle activity once more. The gathering party returns, food is sorted, wood is stacked, children rush forward to see what has been brought back. Their excitement is immediate, questions appear everywhere. Tiny hands reach toward roots, berries, feathers, and unfamiliar objects. The adults laugh softly, patiently, mostly. You notice how much energy flows from older people toward younger ones. Food, protection, teaching, comfort, correction, encouragement. Human childhood creates obligations, but it also creates connections. Without children, knowledge ends. Without elders, knowledge fades. The two depend upon each other. Evening arrives gradually. Golden light touches the edges of the trees. Shadows stretch across the camp. The fire burns brighter as the air cools. The children begin settling down. Not immediately, not willingly, but eventually. One falls asleep against a parent's shoulder. Another curls beneath a hide covering. The little girl who spent the morning investigating everything finally closes her eyes. For a rare moment, she has no more questions. The adults sit quietly around the fire. Their faces glow orange in the darkness. You look from one sleeping child to another. Each carries a future nobody can fully predict. A future hunter, a future storyteller, a future parent, a future keeper of memories. Perhaps this is the deeper purpose hidden within the unusually long human childhood. Time. Time to learn. Time to imitate. Time to imagine. Time to absorb a world far too complicated to master quickly. The fire crackles softly. The stars emerge overhead. The children sleep. The adults watch. And beneath the vast prehistoric sky, you begin to understand that one of humanity's greatest strengths may not be how quickly we grow, but how long we're allowed to learn. Night settles in more fully now, and the camp becomes a circle of soft breathing, faint movement, and firelight that flickers like a living thing trying not to fall asleep. You sit close to the warmth, pulling your hide tighter as the air cools again. The ground has lost the warmth of the day, and a thin layer of cold returns from beneath the soil. Above you, the sky is clearer than it was earlier. Stars scatter across it in dense clusters, bright enough that you can almost forget how dark the land becomes without them. Almost. Around the fire, people shift into quieter states. Not asleep yet, not fully awake. That in-between space where thoughts move more slowly and words become rare. Someone stirs the embers. A soft glow rises. then fades again, then returns. This small act of tending fire is one of the most important human behaviors in prehistory. Archaeological evidence suggests that control of fire existed for hundreds of thousands of years in various forms, though exactly when consistent mastery developed remains widely studied. Fire changed everything. It extended the day, protected against predators, cooked food, and transformed social life into something that could continue long after sunset. Yet here, it is not only practical, it is social. You watch how faces turn toward the flame, how silence gathers around it, how even the smallest crackle draws attention. And then, slowly, someone begins to speak, not loudly, not formally, just a voice emerging from the dark, shaped by memory and rhythm. It is the storyteller from earlier. He sits slightly apart, but still within the circle of light. His hands rest loosely on his knees. His eyes move between the fire and the people listening. The children are half asleep, but still alert enough to follow the tone. You notice how everyone adjusts without thinking. Bodies lean in, breathing slows, attention tightens. This is where something remarkable happens. Language becomes more than instruction. It becomes shared imagination. A well-established finding in anthropology is that storytelling likely played a major role in early human societies. Stories transmit knowledge about danger, cooperation, resources, identity, and environment. They also strengthen group cohesion by creating shared emotional experiences. But here, in this quiet, firelit space, it feels simpler than theory. It feels like presence. The storyteller gestures toward the darkness beyond the camp. His voice lowers. He speaks of a time when the river was higher, when the hills were different, when an animal came too close to the shelters. You cannot fully understand the words, but the structure is familiar even across time. Cause, event, consequence, fear, response, memory. The fire pops, a spark rises. Someone in the circle shifts slightly closer to another person without noticing. Stories do that. They pull people together. A quirky detail from archaeological interpretations is that some researchers believe early storytelling may have served as a kind of mental map, not just describing events, but organizing landscapes, relationships, and risks into something easier to remember and share. A story becomes a container for survival knowledge, and survival, in this world, is never far away. The storyteller pauses, then changes tone. The story becomes softer, less about danger, more about belonging. He speaks of ancestors, of people who lived before, of paths walked long ago. The fire reflects in his eyes, and for a moment, you wonder how far back these stories go. How many nights like this have existed in human history? How many voices have shaped darkness into meaning? Around you, the camp listens. Even those who are almost asleep remain within the sound. You feel something subtle happening in the group, a shared inner space forming, not physical, not visible, but real in its effect. Everyone is together inside the same story. Researchers continue to explore why humans developed such strong narrative thinking. Some suggest it helps organize memory. Others argue it strengthens social bonds. Some propose it improves planning by simulating possible futures. There is no single explanation accepted by all scholars. The evidence supports multiple overlapping functions, and yet none of that fully captures the feeling of it. The storyteller continues. His voice slows. The fire dims slightly, then brightens again as fresh wood is added. A child shifts in sleep and is gently adjusted by an adult without waking. Someone smiles faintly at a familiar part of the tale. The story reaches a quieter section, a pause, then a small detail is added, something unexpected, a sound in the forest, a decision made too late, a moment of hesitation. The group leans in again. Even sleep cannot fully interrupt attention when it is shared like this. You realize that storytelling here is not entertainment in the modern sense. It is coordination. It is memory preservation. It is emotional training. It is a way of rehearsing responses to life without needing the event to occur again. A lesser-known observation in cognitive science is that humans often remember stories more easily than isolated facts. Narrative structure helps the brain link information into patterns. In early societies, this would have been invaluable. Knowledge that could be remembered was knowledge that could survive. The storyteller reaches the end of his tale. His voice softens. He lowers his hands. The fire settles again into quiet crackling. Silence returned, but it is different now, not empty. Full. People sit with the story still inside them. You feel it too, even without fully understanding the words. A sense of shared experience, a sense of having been somewhere together. The group begins to shift into sleep, one by one, slowly, without announcement. The children are already there. The adults follow. The storyteller leans back slightly and watches the fire. His work is done for the night. You lie down again beside the warmth. The stars above feel closer now, as if the story has pulled the sky a little lower. Somewhere beyond the firelight, the forest is completely dark, but inside the circle, something remains illuminated, not just heat, not just light, but meaning passed from one mind to many. Before writing existed, before records could be stored outside the body, stories were one of the most powerful technologies humans had. They carried warnings, they carried history, they carried identity, and perhaps, most importantly, they carried connection. As your eyes grow heavier, you notice how the group breathes in a shared rhythm, not identical, but aligned. The fire pulses softly, the storyteller falls silent, and the night continues around a group of humans who, for all their vulnerability, have learned to survive not only through tools or strength, but through the simple act of telling each other what the world means. The fire shrunk again during the night, becoming a tight cluster of glowing coals that seem to breathe very slowly in the dark. You're not fully asleep, not fully awake either. That quiet in-between state makes everything feel softer, as if the world has been wrapped in a thin layer of silence. The air is cold against your face, but the hide over your body holds a steady warmth. Around you, the camp is still. Only small movements remain. A hand adjusting a blanket, a child shifting closer to an adult, a faint exhale in sleep, then stillness again. Above, the stars remain bright, unmoving from this perspective, as if they are watching in their own patient way. You think about the story you heard earlier. It still lingers, not as words, but as impressions, a place in your mind where images and meanings gather without effort. This is where another rare human trait becomes visible, memory that reaches beyond the present moment. A mainstream historical understanding is that early human survival depended heavily on shared memory, not written memory, but living memory carried between individuals and across generations. People remembered where water could be found in dry seasons. They remembered which plants were safe, which paths were dangerous, which animals migrated at certain times of year. This knowledge was not stored in one mind alone. It was distributed across the group. You shift slightly on the ground. The earth is cold beneath you, but familiar now. The texture of sleeping outside begins to feel normal in a way that modern life rarely allows. No walls, no clocks, no artificial division between night and morning except light itself. You hear a faint sound from somewhere beyond the camp, a distant crack, then silence. No one moves. The sound does not return. The group remains calm. Experience has taught them what matters and what does not. Memory is not only about remembering facts, it is also about learning what to ignore. Your mind drifts again. You think of the faces you saw earlier in the day, the boy with the flint, the older woman guiding children, the storyteller shaping silence into meaning. Each of them carries memories that are not written anywhere except in their minds and in their shared experiences. A lesser-known detail from cognitive anthropology suggests that human memory is especially strong when tied to emotion and social interaction. Events that involve cooperation, danger, learning, or strong attention are more likely to be remembered and passed on. In a world without external records, forgetting is not just personal, it is collective loss. You close your eyes for a moment, then open them again. Sleep does not fully take you yet. Instead, your thoughts move into a deeper reflection. What does it mean for a group to remember together? Not just individuals recalling their own experiences, but many people reinforcing the same events, stories, warnings, and meanings over time. A single person might forget where a river bends, but if 10 people remember it, and each of them tells another, the memory becomes stable. It becomes shared truth. This shared memory likely played a key role in early human cooperation. Researchers still debate how complex collective memory systems emerged, but many agree that storytelling, ritual, repetition, and daily practice all contributed to strengthening group knowledge. The fire pulses gently again as someone adds a small piece of wood. You open your eyes. The flame grows slightly brighter. It casts moving shadows across sleeping faces. Each face holds its own private world, yet all are connected by shared experience. You notice something subtle. Even in sleep, people seem to stay close to one another, bodies positioned carefully, children near adults, adults near the center of warmth. No one formally organizes this. It happens naturally, a kind of unspoken arrangement shaped by thousands of nights of similar behavior. Safety is not only physical in this world, it is social, it is remembered, it is expected, and it is reinforced every night around fires like this one. The idea of memory begins to feel larger the longer you think about it. It is not just recollection, it is structure. It shapes how people move, how they trust, how they prepare, how they teach. Without memory, every day would feel like the first day. With memory, the world becomes layered. Past experiences influence present choices. Future expectations shape current behavior. You feel the weight of that idea settle gently in your mind, then soften again as sleep approaches. Somewhere beyond the firelight, the wind moves through grass, a branch creaks. The river continues its steady flow, unchanged by human thought or concern, and yet, inside this small circle of sleeping humans, the past is alive, not written, not stored in stone, but carried in breath, in stories, in habits, in gestures, in the way hands move toward fire without needing instruction. A quirky observation from studies of traditional societies is that collective memory is often reinforced through repetition in daily tasks. Skills are practiced, stories retold, routes followed again and again until they become part of the body itself. Memory is not separate from life, it is embedded in it. You feel your breathing slow. The fire is now very small. Only embers remain, but even in that dim glow, there is a sense that something continues. Not just heat, not just survival, but continuity. A chain of remembered experience stretching backward through generations you will never meet, and forward toward people who will never know your name. You begin to understand, in a quiet way, that memory is not only about the past, it is also about connection between people who share a moment, between people who never meet, between what was lived and what is still becoming. The night deepens once more, the camp remains still, and as sleep finally arrives, you drift into the shared silence of a group that survives not only through strength or tools, but through the quiet power of remembering together. The night has deepened into its quietest hour. Even the wind feels slower now, moving gently through the trees as if it is careful not to disturb anything. The fire is almost gone, reduced to a few dim embers that glow like tired eyes half closed in sleep. Around them, the camp rests in a loose circle of bodies and breath. You lie still, listening. A faint rustle, a distant branch shifting, the soft, uneven rhythm of sleeping people, and beneath it all, the steady presence of the earth itself, cold and patient. In moments like this, human life feels very small, yet also strangely connected, as if each sleeping person is part of something larger that continues even when awareness fades. Your thoughts drift again, slower now, less structured, more like fragments floating in warm darkness. Memory, tools, fire, faces, stories, each one blending into the next. One widely supported interpretation in evolutionary anthropology suggests that human cognitive development was strongly shaped by social complexity. As early human groups grew more interconnected, individuals needed to track relationships, remember past interactions, anticipate intentions, and navigate cooperation and conflict within the group. In simple terms, life became social in a very demanding way, and the mind had to keep up. You shift slightly on the ground. The hide beneath you is rough but warm where your body is pressed into it. The cold air touches your cheek, but it no longer feels sharp. Instead, it feels distant, as if it belongs to another layer of the world that you are only lightly connected to right now, somewhere nearby. A child murmurs in sleep. An adult turns once, slowly, then becomes still again. The fire gives a final faint pulse, then settles lower. You think about how much of human life depends on remembering other people. Not just their names or faces, but their actions. Who shared food? Who gave warning? Who helped? Who did not? Who could be trusted in winter? Who could be relied upon when the river rose? Another perspective found in archaeological and psychological research points towards social memory as a key survival tool. In small groups, reputation and shared recollection of behavior can influence cooperation far more than formal rules ever could. A person is not only who they are now, but who others remember them to be. In the dim light, you imagine how fragile that system must have been. A misunderstanding could linger. A helpful act could be remembered for years. A mistake could shape trust long after the moment passed, and yet it worked. The group around you still exists, still breathes, still survives. The embers shift slightly as a small piece of ash collapses inward. A soft glow rises for a moment, then fades. You notice how even the fire behaves like memory. It holds heat for a while after the fuel is gone, as if refusing to fully let go of what it once was. Slowly, it transforms into something simpler, quieter, less visible. Just like everything else here, you begin to feel that sleep is closer now, but your mind remains lightly active, hovering between thought and surrender. A small movement catches your attention. The boy with the flint from earlier is still awake, barely. He sits with his knees drawn close, head tilted forward. The small stone tool rests in his hand again. He's not shaping it now, not striking it, just holding it as if it is something he's trying to understand without words. His eyes close briefly, then open again. He is resisting sleep, not out of fear, but out of quiet fascination with the object in his hand. You watch him for a moment. In him, something simple and profound is visible. Learning does not end when the day ends. It continues in silence, in holding, in remembering, in thinking without speaking. Another detail often discussed in studies of early cognition is that humans appear uniquely capable of offline thinking, where the mind continues to simulate, rehearse, and explore ideas even without external stimulation. This ability may have been crucial for planning, imagination, and tool innovation. The boy finally lowers his head. His hand relaxes. The flint remains beside him, still important, still present, but no longer actively studied. Sleep takes him gently, as it takes everyone else. One by one, the circle of bodies becomes stiller. Breathing deepens, shoulders soften. The camp becomes almost indistinguishable from the surrounding darkness, except for the faint outline of shared warmth where the fire once burned strongly. You close your eyes again. This time, they stay closed. Your thoughts slow further, dissolving into simpler impressions: warmth, darkness, breath, the distant memory of voices, and the sense that you're not alone in this silence, even as everything around you rests. The fire is now only ash and faint glow, yet it still marks the center of something important, a place where humans gather, where they remember, where they learn, where they become themselves, together. And as sleep finally deepens, you drift into the oldest rhythm of human existence, carried by a group that survives not only through movement or tools, but through the quiet continuity of shared life in the dark. The world shifts gently while you sleep, not suddenly, not dramatically, but in the slow, quiet way night becomes early morning. The darkness thins at the edges first, like ink spreading too far and then beginning to fade. The cold remains, but it softens slightly, as if the earth is exhaling after a long hold. You open your eyes to a pale horizon. The camp is still here, still breathing, still gathered in its loose circle of warmth and bodies. The fire is almost gone now, only a faint scatter of ash with a few dim embers hiding beneath it like memories that refuse to disappear completely. A soft mist hangs over the ground. Everything feels muted. Sound travels differently in this hour. Even small movements seem distant, as if the world has not fully decided to be awake yet. You sit up slowly. Nearby, someone is already moving, not many, just a few early risers. One person crouches near the fire remains, gently adding dry grass and carefully coaxing a thin thread of smoke back into a flame. It responds reluctantly, then slowly, then finally catches. A fragile beginning of light returns to the center of the camp. What you're witnessing is not just fire maintenance. It is a continuation of something far older and more important than any single moment. Archaeological evidence from multiple prehistoric sites suggests that controlled fire use was not only about warmth or cooking, but about maintaining continuity across time. Keeping a fire alive meant preserving safety, memory of place, and group stability. In some interpretations, it also reinforced social bonds, since tending fire was a shared responsibility that required coordination and trust. The fire grows a little stronger. Faces become visible again in the grey light. One by one, people begin to wake. A child stretches, then immediately curls back into warmth. An adult rubs their hands together and breathes into them. Someone checks the perimeter of the camp, scanning the trees with slow, practiced attention. There is no urgency, only habit. You notice how morning here is not a single moment of awakening, but a gradual unfolding of awareness across the group. Each person enters the day at a slightly different pace, as if consciousness itself arrives in waves. Near the fire, the boy with the flint is already awake again. He's watching the embers, not touching them yet, just observing. There is something quiet and focused in his expression, as if he is trying to understand how fire behaves when it is not fully alive, how it waits, how it remembers heat even after flame is gone. You sit beside him, neither of you speaks. The morning air is cold enough to make breath visible in faint white threads that disappear quickly into the surrounding grey. A woman walks past carrying a bundle of sticks. A man checks a spear. 2 children appear from beneath a hide and immediately begin whispering to each other. Their voices low but energetic, like small rivers starting to flow again after freezing overnight. Life resumes, not all at once, but steadily. One fascinating detail often highlighted in archaeological interpretations is that fire sites tend to show repeated long-term use, suggesting that certain locations were returned to again and again. These places may have functioned as anchors in the landscape, helping early groups orient themselves, rest, gather, and rebuild social structure. In a sense, the fire becomes more than an object. It becomes a place in memory. You stand and move slightly away from the embers, feeling the uneven ground beneath your feet. The camp is beginning to reorganize itself for the day. People gather tools, adjust clothing, and look outward toward the land beyond the shelter. There is always something beyond. A ridge, a river, a patch of trees, a direction where food might be found. You watch as the group prepares without formal instruction. There's no single leader calling commands. Instead, small decisions accumulate through observation and response. Someone lifts a tool, and another follows. Someone looks toward the hills, and others align with that intention. Coordination emerges naturally. Another perspective from cognitive anthropology suggests that early human cooperation relied heavily on shared attention and mutual prediction. Individuals did not need explicit plans if they could reliably interpret the actions and intentions of others. A glance, a movement, or a change in posture could be enough to guide group behavior. You feel this now as the group begins to shift outward, not scattered, not chaotic, but loosely synchronized. You walk with them again, away from the fire, into the pale morning landscape. The grass is wet underfoot. The air carries the scent of earth and cold water. Birds are louder now, calling across the trees with growing confidence. The boy with the flint walks near you. He still holds it, not proudly this time, just naturally, as if it belongs to his hand now in a quiet, settled way. Ahead, the land opens into a wider space where the river bends and the ground becomes softer. The group slows as they approach. Someone crouches to examine the soil. Someone else scans the water's edge. Small signs matter here. Tracks, broken reeds, disturbed mud. The world speaks in traces. You follow their attention and begin to notice how much of survival depends not on what is seen directly, but on what is inferred from subtle evidence left behind. A footprint, a bent branch, a change in silence. A lesser-known observation in study of hunter-gatherer cognition is that skilled trackers often develop an almost narrative interpretation of landscapes. They do not simply see signs, but read sequences of events. Something passed here, paused there, moved that way, returned later. The land becomes a kind of unfolding story. You kneel slightly, looking at the ground near the river. There are faint marks, not dramatic, just impressions in softened earth. Someone was here. Something moved through. The group does not rush. They observe, compare, interpret quietly among themselves using gestures, brief sounds, and shared understanding. The boy crouches beside you. He looks closely at the ground, then at the water, then back again. You can almost see his mind trying to connect fragments into something meaningful. A pattern forming, slowly, carefully. The fire may be behind you now, but its influence remains. It gathered people, it anchored memory. It shaped how mornings began and how groups prepared for movement. And as the day opens wider in front of you, you begin to sense the deeper structure of this life, not just survival, not just movement, but constant interpretation. A world that must always be read, and a mind that is always learning how to read it. The river is wider here than you expected. It moves slowly, but with a steady confidence, as if it has been practicing its path for a very long time and has no intention of changing it for anyone. Mist rises from the surface in thin layers, drifting across the water and softening everything it touches. You stand at the edge with the group. No one speaks loudly. The sound of the river is enough. It fills the space between people, a constant background presence that makes even small noises feel important. A foot shifting on stone, a quiet breath, a twig snapping under careful weight. All of it becomes part of the moment. Before crossing, the group studies the land with attention that feels almost ceremonial, though no ceremony is named. Stones in the river form a broken line toward the opposite bank. Some are dry, some are wet and dark, some disappear beneath the current entirely. Someone steps forward first, tests the stability, then pauses, then signals the next movement with a small tilt of the head. One widely supported interpretation in archaeology is that river crossings played a significant role in shaping early human planning and cooperation. Moving through water requires coordination, patience, and shared decision-making, especially when children, tools, and food are involved. Even small missteps can have consequences, so attention becomes collective. You watch as the first person steps carefully onto a stone, then another. The group begins to cross slowly, one at a time, maintaining distance, watching each other's movements closely. The water is cold enough that even the air above it feels sharper. You step onto the first stone. It shifts slightly beneath your weight. Not enough to fall, but enough to make your body react immediately. Arms lifting, balance adjusting without conscious thought. You move forward, stone to stone. Careful rhythm. The river flows below you, dark and bright at the same time, reflecting the pale sky in broken pieces. Halfway across, you pause. The water here is deeper, the current stronger. You look ahead, then down, then forward again. Someone behind you waits quietly, not pressing, not rushing. This shared patience is essential. In small groups, pressure creates risk. Coordination depends on trust, and trust depends on allowing space for each person's movement. You continue, one step, then another, then finally reach the far bank. Soft earth meets your feet again. You exhale without realizing you are holding your breath. A lesser-known detail in studies of early human movement patterns is that rivers often acted as both barriers and guides. While they could restrict movement, they also provided orientation, resources, and predictable pathways through landscapes. Many archaeological sites are found near ancient waterways for this reason. The group gathers again on the opposite side. No celebration, just continuation. People check their tools, adjust loads, and look outward toward the next stretch of land. The terrain here is different, slightly more open, grass shorter, trees spaced farther apart. The wind moves more freely across the ground. You notice how quickly attention shifts from crossing to scanning. What is ahead? What is usable? What is safe? What is uncertain? The boy with the flint stands near you again. He bends slightly, picking up a small stone from the ground. He turns it in his fingers, comparing it to the one he already carries. Then, after a moment, he puts it back. Not every object becomes meaningful, but everything is considered. That willingness to examine the world closely, even without immediate purpose, is one of the quiet foundations of human adaptability. The group begins to move inland. The river fades behind you, its sound becoming softer as distance grows. The land opens into rolling terrain with patches of shrubs and scattered trees. Light wind moves through the grass, creating a wave-like motion that travels across the field. You walk in rhythm with others, not perfectly synchronized, but loosely aligned, like a system that adjusts itself continuously. Occasionally someone stops, points, waits. The group responds. This is how navigation happens without maps. A mainstream archaeological understanding is that early human groups relied heavily on environmental cues such as water sources, animal trails, plant distribution, and seasonal patterns to move through landscapes. Knowledge of terrain was stored collectively and transmitted through repeated travel and shared experience. You begin to notice subtle differences in the ground. Some areas are firmer, some softer. Some show faint traces of animal movement. Tracks appear briefly, then fade again. The group follows without formal discussion, adjusting direction as needed. At one point, everyone slows. Something is ahead, not immediately visible, but felt. The posture of the group changes. Heads lift slightly. Movements become quieter. The air feels more concentrated, as if attention itself has weight. You see it a moment later, a small herd in the distance, partially hidden among tall grass. They are not alarmed yet, just aware. The group stops fully now. No one speaks. This is not a hunt yet. It is observation. Timing matters. Distance matters. Wind matters. The boy beside you is very still. His hand tightens slightly around the flint. You can feel the shift in energy across the group. Subtle, but real. Not fear, not excitement alone. Something more controlled. Focused anticipation. A quirky detail from ethnoarchaeological studies is that many hunter-gatherer groups today, and likely in the past, approach hunting as a highly coordinated activity requiring reading of wind direction, animal behavior, terrain layout, and group positioning. Success depends less on speed and more on timing and shared understanding. The herd moves slowly, unaware. The group watches. Then, after a long moment, one person gives a quiet signal, a change in posture, a slight shift forward. The group responds immediately, but gently, not rushing, not breaking formation. You move with them, through grass, lowering your profile slightly. The wind is on your side. For now, the animals remain unaware. Every step feels measured, as if the ground itself is listening. Then, suddenly, the herd lifts its heads. Something has changed. A scent, a sound, a pressure in the air. They begin to move, not panicked yet, but alert. The group pauses instantly and stillness returns. The opportunity shifts, and just as quickly as it appeared, it begins to dissolve. There is no chaos, only adjustment. The herd moves away gradually into the grass. The group remains where it is, watching, accepting, then slowly relaxing again. A hunt in early human life is not always success or failure in simple terms. It is often timing, learning, and observation. Each attempt adds knowledge, even when no immediate result is achieved. You stand in the tall grass, breathing slowly. The boy beside you loosens his grip on the flint. The tension fades. The world becomes open again. Wind moves through the field. The herd disappears into distance, and the group continues forward, carrying with them not just tools or hunger, but understanding of land, movement, and the delicate balance between presence and possibility. The herd has vanished into the tall grass, leaving only the memory of movement behind it. For a moment, the land feels strangely empty, as if something important has just passed through and taken a small part of the air with it. The group does not rush after it. There is no shouting, no frustration, no collapse of attention. Instead, there is a quiet acceptance that the moment has shifted. You stand still in the grass. The wind moves through it in soft waves. Somewhere in the distance, birds rise and settle again. Life continues, just not in the direction you expected. One widely discussed interpretation in studies of early human behavior is that hunting was not always about immediate success. It often involved tracking, waiting, reading environmental signals, and adapting to sudden changes in animal movement. In many cases, the knowledge gained during a failed opportunity was just as valuable as a successful one. You begin walking again with the group. The pace is slower now, more reflective, less focused on pursuit, more on understanding where the animals went and why they chose that direction. The boy with the flint walks close to you again. He seems quieter than before, not disappointed, just thoughtful. He occasionally looks at the grass, then at the ground, as if trying to reconstruct the moment in reverse. Where did they turn? What did they sense? What changed? You notice how the group begins to read the landscape differently after the encounter. Before, the field was just grass. Now it is information. Every patch of movement, every broken stem, every shift in wind direction becomes meaningful. A line of archaeological research suggests that early humans developed highly sensitive environmental awareness as part of survival, not just seeing animals directly, but interpreting indirect signs of their presence and intentions. This kind of awareness is not instinct alone. It is learned attention, built over time through experience shared within the group. You crouch briefly near a flattened section of grass. It is subtle, almost invisible, but someone else in the group notices it too. They kneel beside you, point, then look toward the direction the herd moved. No words are needed. The interpretation is shared instantly. The group will adjust their route, not with certainty, but with probability. You continue walking through the landscape, which now feels slightly different than before. Not because it has changed physically, but because your attention to it has deepened. The ground is no longer just ground. It is a record of movement. The wind is no longer just wind. It is a factor in decision-making. This shift in perception is one of the most important transformations in human cognitive history. At some point, humans stopped merely existing in environments and began reading them. You pass through a stretch of land where the grass grows shorter and the soil becomes firmer. Small stones are scattered unevenly, some partially buried, some exposed. The group spreads out slightly here, scanning more widely. Someone gestures toward a distant ridge. Another responds with a subtle nod. Direction is being negotiated continuously, not spoken, observed, adjusted. Another interesting detail often highlighted in archaeological interpretation is that prehistoric movement across landscapes likely involved constant micro-decisions. Which path is easier? Which direction offers cover? Where water might appear? Where animals are likely to rest? These decisions accumulate into broader routes that eventually become habitual migration paths. You feel this process happening in real time, step by step, choice by choice. The group is shaping its path through the land as much as the land is shaping the group. As the afternoon light grows warmer, the terrain begins to slope gently downward. A distant shimmer appears between trees. Water again. Not the wide river from earlier, but a smaller stream cutting through a shallow valley. The group slows as they approach. Water always requires attention. It is life. It is risk. It is meeting point. At the edge of the stream, the group spreads out. Some kneel to drink. Some watch for movement in the reeds. Some check the surrounding trees. You kneel as well. The water is clear and cold. It moves quickly over small stones, creating soft overlapping sounds that feel almost rhythmic. You drink carefully, feeling the chill spread through your body. Nearby, the boy crouches too. He watches the water flow, then dips his fingers in, then pulls them back quickly, as if surprised by the cold. For a brief moment, he smiles, small, private, then gone. You look around the stream. There are signs of life here too, broken stems, disturbed mud, small footprints near the edge, not the herd from before, something else, smaller animals, moving separately. The group notices as well. Attention shifts again, not toward hunting immediately, but toward understanding. A lesser-known observation in ethnographic studies is that many hunter-gatherer groups treat water sources as informational hubs, not just places for hydration, but places where multiple types of environmental information converge: animal activity, seasonal changes, plant growth, and even social encounters between groups. The stream becomes a meeting point for knowledge. You sit for a while on a flat stone near the water. The sound of flowing current fills the space between people. Tension from earlier has fully faded now. The herd encounter is already becoming memory, not failure, not success, just part of understanding the land more deeply. The group begins preparing to rest here briefly, not permanently, just long enough to recover, observe, and decide the next direction. You notice how even rest in this world is active in its own way. People are always watching, listening, interpreting. The environment is never ignored, even in moments of stillness. The boy sits beside you again, still holding the flint. He taps it lightly against another stone. Once, then stops. He looks at you, then at the stream, then back at the flint, as if trying to connect all three: stone, water, movement, possibility. A quiet curiosity settles in his expression, not urgent, not loud, but steady. And as the light begins to shift again toward late afternoon, you realize that every part of this day has been shaping something deeper than survival. It has been shaping attention itself, how to see, how to interpret, how to move through a world that is never still, never simple, and never fully explained. And the group, without needing to say it, continues learning how to belong to that world together. The stream grows quieter behind you as the group moves on, not because the water has changed, but because distance slowly reshapes everything. Sounds soften, details blur. Even memories begin to lose their sharp edges as you walk away from them. The land ahead opens into a broader valley. Gentle slopes, scattered trees, long stretches of grass that bend and rise with the wind like a slow-breathing surface. You walk at an even pace now, following the group as they navigate without clear paths. There are no marked roads, no signs, no landmarks with names that would mean anything outside this moment. Instead, direction is held in shared understanding, passed through glances, pauses, and subtle shifts in movement. One widely supported idea in archaeological research is that early human groups developed what could be described as collective navigation. Rather than relying on a single leader, direction emerged from multiple individuals reading terrain cues together. Experience was distributed, and decisions formed through alignment rather than instruction. You notice this happening constantly. Someone slows, others adjust, someone points, the group turns slightly as no words are needed. The boy with the flint walks near the center again. He is no longer studying the object as intensely as before. Instead, he carries it casually, as if it has become part of his presence rather than a separate fascination. Every so often he taps it lightly against his palm, as though checking that it is still real. Ahead, the valley begins to narrow again. The grass becomes taller. The wind shifts direction slightly, bringing a cooler scent from somewhere beyond the ridge. The group slows. Attention gathers. Not tension exactly, but readiness. Something about this place feels different. You cannot say why at first, but your body reacts before your thoughts form. A subtle awareness spreads through the group, eyes scanning, steps shortening, breathing becoming quieter. Archaeological interpretations of prehistoric movement often emphasize this kind of environmental sensitivity. Early humans appear to have been highly attuned to subtle changes in landscape conditions, including vegetation density, sound reflection, wind direction, and animal presence. These cues would have shaped decisions long before danger or opportunity became visible. You step carefully into the taller grass. It brushes against your legs, softer than expected, but dense. Movement becomes slightly slower here. Visibility reduces. The world feels closer, more enclosed, as if the valley is gently folding around you. Then you hear it, a faint sound, not loud, not immediate, something between movement and stillness. The group stops. Instantly, you follow their gaze. Nothing is clearly visible at first. Then shapes emerge. Not animals this time. People. Another group, distant at the edge of the valley, partially obscured by grass and light, standing still, watching. The air changes, not hostile, not friendly, just uncertain. A lesser-known detail in ethnographic studies of hunter-gatherer societies is that encounters between groups are often highly cautious and structured. Initial distance is maintained. Body language is carefully observed. Direct approach is avoided until intentions become clearer. These interactions can range from exchange to avoidance, depending on context. You remain still. The group you are with does not move forward, nor do they retreat immediately. Instead, there's a pause that feels stretched. Time seems to slow. You notice how communication happens without sound again. A tilt of the head, a shift in stance, a hand lowered slightly. The other group responds in kind. No aggression, but no invitation either. Just mutual awareness. The boy beside you grips the flint a little tighter, not threatening, just instinctive. A protective gesture that he may not fully understand yet. You feel the group you're with subtly reorganizing itself, not forming a defensive posture, but aligning, presenting calm stability. A signal that says, we are here and we are not in panic. Another interpretation found in anthropological research suggests that early human groups likely relied heavily on visual negotiation during such encounters. Facial expressions, posture, distance, and movement would have communicated far more than spoken language at first contact. After a long moment, the distant group shifts slightly. One person steps back, another turns sideways. The tension does not disappear, but it loosens. Then, slowly, both groups begin to move, not toward each other, not away in fear, but along separate paths that diverge gently across the valley. A controlled separation, a mutual decision without agreement. You exhale without realizing you'd been holding your breath. As the other group fades into distance, the grass seems to open again. The valley feels wider, less compressed, more breathable. No conflict occurred, but something important was still exchanged. Awareness, recognition, the understanding that the world is shared, even when paths do not meet. You continue walking with your group. No one speaks about the encounter. There is no need. It has already been processed collectively, silently, through observation and adjustment. As afternoon light begins to soften again, the terrain shifts once more. The ground becomes slightly firmer. Small clusters of stones appear. The grass lowers in patches, revealing uneven earth shaped by time and weather. You notice the boy relaxing again. His grip loosens. He taps the flint once more, then stops, looks ahead, then at the ground, then at the sky. A quiet rhythm of curiosity returning. Another interesting observation often mentioned in studies of early human cognition is that environmental awareness and social awareness likely developed together. The ability to read landscapes and the ability to read people may have reinforced each other, creating a mind that constantly interprets both terrain and intention simultaneously. You feel this dual awareness now. The land is not just physical space, it is also social space. It contains paths and presences, roots and relationships. As the group moves deeper into the valley, the earlier encounter begins to feel distant, not forgotten, but integrated. Just another layer in the ongoing process of reading the world. The light grows warmer, shadows lengthen slightly, and the group continues forward, carrying with them not only tools and supplies, but also the memory of another group seen briefly in the grass, a reminder that they are not alone in this vast shifting landscape, and that every journey through it is shared, even when paths do not cross. Evening arrives slowly over the valley, as if the day is reluctant to let go of its shape. The light changes first. It becomes softer, less direct, more golden at the edges. Then the shadows stretch out across the grass, thinning everything into long patterns that move gently with the wind. The group begins to slow without being told. Movement always softens at this hour, not because of fatigue alone, but because attention itself changes when daylight fades. You walk with the group toward a slightly raised area of ground near a line of trees. It offers visibility over the valley while also giving some shelter from the wind. This kind of site selection is not random. It is learned over generations, passed through experience rather than instruction. Archaeological interpretations of early settlement patterns suggest that prehistoric groups often chose locations based on a combination of water access, visibility, shelter, and proximity to food sources. These decisions were not written down, yet they appear consistently across sites from different regions and time periods. In other words, people learn the land, and the land shaped their choices in return. You lower yourself onto the ground as others begin preparing a temporary rest site. Small actions unfold in sequence, sticks gathered, stone arranged, a shallow fire pit formed. Nothing rushed, everything familiar. The boy with the flint sits nearby again, but today he is quieter. The object rests loosely in his hand. He is not focused on shaping it or studying it closely. Instead, he watches the group with a different kind of attention, as if trying to understand something less visible than tools. The social rhythm of the group, who moves where, who speaks first, who remains silent. A lesser-known detail in cognitive anthropology suggests that human attention is deeply social even in non-verbal environments. People constantly track others, not just for communication, but for prediction. Who will act next? Who will lead movement? Who will respond to change? This awareness is not taught directly. It develops through immersion. You notice it yourself now. Someone begins arranging firewood. Another checks food bundles. A third person scans the horizon one last time before settling. No one coordinates this explicitly, yet everything aligns. As the fire is rebuilt, smoke rises in a thin column before bending with the wind. The smell of burning wood returns. Familiar, comforting, slightly sharp in the nose, You sit closer to the warmth as dusk deepens, and in this quiet transition between day and night, something subtle begins to surface again in your thoughts. The encounter from earlier in the valley, the other group, their presence still lingers in memory, not as a threat or event, but as a reminder of distance and similarity existing at the same time. Another set of humans moving through the same world, different direction, different choices, same landscape. One widely supported idea in prehistoric studies is that encounters between groups could range widely in nature, from avoidance to exchange to occasional cooperation, depending on context such as resource availability and familiarity. These interactions were likely shaped more by caution and observation than by immediate conflict. You think about how brief the encounter was, a moment of shared awareness, then separation. No words exchanged that you could understand, yet something communicated nonetheless. Recognition, perhaps, or simply acknowledgement of presence. The fire grows brighter as night settles in fully. Faces emerge again from the darkness around the circle. The storyteller from earlier is not speaking tonight. Instead, there is quiet activity, people eating small portions of gathered food, children settling near adults, tools placed carefully within reach. The camp becomes still in stages, like a body slowly relaxing into sleep. Above you, stars begin to appear again, one by one, until the sky is once more filled with cold, distant light. You lie back slightly, feeling the warmth of the fire on your face and the coolness of the ground beneath your body. Your thoughts drift without direction. The valley, the river, the herd, the stream, the other group, each memory layering softly over the next. Another interesting observation from studies of early human cognition is that memory in such environments was often spatially organized. Events were tied to places. Knowledge was embedded in landscapes. Rather than abstract categories, information existed as lived experience connected to specific locations. Here, memory is not something you carry. It is something you walk through. The boy with the flint shifts slightly beside you. He is almost asleep. The object rests now against the ground, no longer studied, just present, a small piece of stone that has followed him through several changes in light, movement, and attention. You watch the fire for a while longer. It crackles softly. Occasionally a spark lifts upward and disappears into the night. The group is quiet now, fully settled. The valley beyond the camp is dark and still, yet not empty, never empty. Somewhere out there, rivers continue to move. Animals continue their unseen paths. Other groups may be resting, travelling, or watching their own fires burn low. The world is shared, even when unseen. And as your awareness begins to soften into sleep, you feel that quiet understanding settle gently within you. You're part of a landscape that is always larger than any single moment. And yet, for now, you are here, by the fire, in the night, with others, breathing together under the same distant sky. The night feels deeper now, as if the valley itself has folded inward and become smaller around the fire. You wake not fully from sleep, but from a softer place inside it. The kind of awareness where thoughts drift before they fully form, and the body remembers warmth before the mind remembers why it matters. The fire is low again, not gone, just reduced to a quiet heartbeat of glowing embers. Around you, the group remains in scattered stillness. Some are asleep, some are half awake, some are simply lying with eyes open, watching the darkness without focusing on anything in particular. The air is colder than before. It carries the faint scent of ash, damp earth, and burned wood that has lost most of its heat. Above, the sky is filled with stars again, sharper now in the absence of light from the fire. They feel closer in moments like this, not physically, but emotionally, as if the boundary between earth and sky becomes thinner at night. You shift slightly and feel the rough texture of the ground beneath you. Small stones, dry grass, the shape of a place that has been used and returned to many times. Nearby, the boy with the flint is still awake, barely. He is not holding the stone anymore. It rests beside him now, half covered by a fold of hide. His eyes open and close slowly, resisting sleep in the way children sometimes do when the world still feels too interesting to let go of. You notice his attention is no longer fixed on objects. Instead, it drifts toward faces, toward movement, toward the faint sounds of breathing around him. One widely supported interpretation in developmental anthropology suggests that early human cognition was shaped not only by tool use and environmental survival, but also by the constant need to interpret social signals within small groups. Attention to others may have become as important as attention to the physical world. In this dim space, that idea feels almost visible. A slight shift of a shoulder, a slow exhale, a hand adjusting a hide. Each movement carries meaning, even in sleep. You turn your gaze toward the edge of the camp. Beyond the firelight, everything dissolves into darkness again. The valley is no longer visible, only implied. Trees become shapes without detail. Distance becomes uncertainty. And yet, nothing feels empty. The world is still full, just less defined. A subtle observation often highlighted in archaeological discussions of nocturnal life is that prehistoric humans likely experienced night as a highly sensory environment rather than a visually dominated one. Sound, smell, and touch would have played much larger roles in awareness than they do in modern illuminated settings. You notice this now. A distant rustle, the faint movement of wind through grass, the almost imperceptible shift of someone turning in sleep. Even silence has texture here. The fire gives a small pulse of light as a hidden ember catches briefly, then settles again. It does not grow, but it reminds everyone of its presence. You feel your breathing slow. The boundary between thought and rest becomes thinner. Images begin to surface without effort. The river, the herd disappearing into grass, the other group in the valley, the long walk through shifting terrain. None of these arrive as full memories. They appear as fragments, pieces of a day still sorting itself inside your mind. Another interesting detail found in cognitive research is that human memory often consolidates experiences during periods of rest. While asleep or half asleep, the brain reorganizes recent events, integrating them into longer-term understanding. In early human life, this process would have been essential for survival, allowing patterns to be recognized over time. You shift again slightly. The boy beside you breathes more evenly now. Sleep is finally taking him. His hand rests loosely near the stone, but no longer reaches for it. Around the camp, more bodies settle deeper into rest. The group becomes quieter with each passing moment, not suddenly, but in layers, like the gradual cooling of a day after sunset. You think briefly about how fragile this world is, a fire that must be maintained, a group that must remain together, a landscape that must be read constantly, a memory that must be shared or it fades. Yet within that fragility there is also strength, because nothing here exists alone. Everything is connected. People, fire, land, movement, attention, knowledge, all woven together in ways that are not written, but lived. A lesser-known perspective in studies of early human societies suggests that survival depended less on individual skill than on collective awareness. What one person missed, another might notice. What one forgot, Another might remember. The group functioned as a shared system of perception. You feel that idea settle gently as sleep approaches again, not as thought, but as impression. The fire fades further. Only a faint glow remains now, barely visible beneath ash and darkness. The stars above remain unchanged, distant and steady, unaffected by the quiet activity below. The valley holds still. The camp holds still. You hold still, and then, slowly, awareness begins to soften again, not disappearing, just loosening its grip. The sounds of breathing become part of the background. The cold becomes less sharp. The ground becomes less hard. Even thought becomes slower, like water settling after movement. In this space between waking and sleep, you feel something simple but vast. The sense of being part of a group that continues even when individuals rest. A shared rhythm of survival. A shared presence in the landscape. A shared quiet under the night sky. And as sleep finally takes you, the last image that remains is not of movement or fire or distance. It is the feeling of others nearby, breathing, resting, alive, together in the dark. Morning does not arrive suddenly in this place. It seeps in, slowly, like water spreading through dry earth. At first, there is only a faint change in the darkness, a slight lifting at the edge of the horizon. The stars begin to lose their sharpness, not disappearing, but softening, as if the sky is gently erasing them one by one. You open your eyes. The fire is nearly gone again, reduced to a thin scatter of ash and a few dim points of heat that survive stubbornly beneath the surface. Around you, the camp is still mostly asleep, breathing, resting, existing in that quiet early state where the body is awake before the mind fully understands the day has begun. The air is colder than you remember from the night. It carries the smell of damp grass and old smoke. Somewhere nearby, a child shifts under a hide, then settles again. No urgency yet, only gradual return. One widely supported interpretation in archaeology and cognitive science suggests that early human groups likely experienced time in highly cyclical patterns, tied closely to natural light, temperature, and resource availability. Without artificial lighting or structured schedules, daily life would have been organized around environmental cues rather than fixed hours. You sit up slowly. The ground feels firm and familiar beneath you now, as if it has held you for a long time without complaint. Across the camp, movement begins again. A woman rises first, walking toward the fire remains. She kneels, studies the ash, and begins the careful work of rebuilding heat. Her hands move with practiced patience, gathering dry material, arranging it with care, protecting what little warmth still remains. This act is small, but essential. Fire here is not only a tool, it is continuity, a link between night and day, between survival and vulnerability. As she works, others begin to wake, one by one, not as a group, but individually, like scattered sparks slowly catching. The boy with the flint stirs beside you. He blinks slowly, then sits up. The stone lies near his hand, exactly where it was left. He picks it up without thinking and rolls it gently between his fingers. No pride this morning, only quiet familiarity. You notice how his attention now moves differently compared to earlier days. Less fascination with the object itself, more awareness of its place within the broader world of the camp. A subtle shift in cognition often discussed in developmental studies is the transition from object-focused curiosity to relational understanding. Rather than simply exploring things, individuals begin to understand how objects, people, and environments connect. You watch him glance toward the fire, then toward the group, then toward the valley beyond. 3 points of attention, 3 parts of the same world. The fire begins to respond again. A faint glow returns, then a small flame, then a steadier burn. Smoke rises in a thin column, drifting upward into the pale morning light. The camp becomes active in a more structured way now, not chaotic, not rushed, but organized through habit. Someone prepares food, someone checks tools, someone examines the surrounding land, someone tends to children who are still half asleep. No instructions are given aloud, yet everything proceeds as if it has been agreed upon in advance. A lesser-known detail from ethnographic studies of traditional societies is that daily roles in small human groups often shift fluidly rather than being rigidly assigned. Individuals adapt based on need, energy, experience, and circumstance. Responsibility is shared and flexible. You stand and stretch your arms. Your body feels slightly heavy from sleep, but not uncomfortable. The morning light strengthens. The valley begins to reveal itself again in layers. Trees, grass, distant slopes, the faint line of water far away. Everything returning to form. The group gathers near the fire as it strengthens. Faces become more visible again. Expressions clearer. You notice small interactions forming naturally. A hand offering food, a nod of acknowledgement, a brief glance that communicates understanding without words. These small signals carry as much meaning as speech here. Perhaps more, because they are immediate, unfiltered, direct. As the fire stabilizes, someone begins to speak quietly. Not a story this time, not instruction, just a few words exchanged between adults, likely about direction, resources, or the condition of the land ahead. You cannot fully understand the content, but you can sense the structure. Decision-making is happening, gradually, collectively, through observation and agreement. Another interpretation often proposed in anthropological research is that early human decision-making was highly distributed. Rather than relying on centralized authority, groups likely form consensus through gradual alignment of perception and intention. You see this now as the group prepares to move, not everyone at once, but in sequence. One person adjusts a bundle, another stands and scans the horizon, another checks the fire once more before stepping away. Movement begins again. The boy with the flint follows close to you. He carries it loosely, not as an object of focus, but as part of his hand's natural posture. The group leaves the campsite slowly, moving back into the valley. The fire remains behind, small but steady, continuing without them for a time. You look back once, then forward again. The landscape opens ahead, familiar now in a way that feels different than before, less unknown, more readable. Paths are no longer just terrain. They are patterns. The group walks in gentle formation, adjusting naturally to changes in ground and wind. Grass bends underfoot. Birds lift briefly into the air and settle again. At one point, the group pauses. Someone has noticed something in the distance. Not danger, not opportunity, just change. A shift in movement across the landscape. Perhaps animals, perhaps another group, perhaps nothing that requires immediate action. Still, attention gathers. You feel the familiar tightening of focus within the group. Eyes align, bodies still. Breathing slows slightly. The world becomes narrower for a moment, then expands again when nothing immediate emerges. The group continues walking. And as you move through the valley once more, you begin to understand how much of this life depends not on dramatic events, but on constant, quiet interpretation. The land is never silent. It is always speaking in traces. And the human mind, shaped by countless generations, has learned how to listen. The valley opens wider as the group continues forward, and the land begins to feel less enclosed than before. Grass stretches farther in every direction, bending gently under a steady wind that moves across the surface like an invisible tide. The sky's clearer now, with high, thin clouds drifting slowly overhead. Light shifts constantly across the ground, never staying in one place for long. You walk with the group at a steady pace, not fast, not slow, just consistent movement shaped by shared rhythm. By now, your body understands this kind of travel more instinctively. The adjustments happen without thought, a slight change in footing, a brief pause to avoid uneven ground, a small correction when the wind pushes against your balance. The group is no longer thinking about each step individually. They are thinking in patterns, distance, direction, resources, time. One widely supported interpretation in archaeological and anthropological research is that early human mobility was highly adaptive rather than fixed. Groups did not follow rigid routes in many environments, but adjusted continuously based on seasonal changes, animal movement, and resource availability. You notice how attention within the group shifts constantly. Someone scans the horizon, someone listens, someone checks the ground for subtle signs, another person adjusts their pace to match those ahead. It is not coordination in the modern sense. It is alignment, a quiet synchronization that happens without formal instruction. The boy with the flint walks near you again. He seems more relaxed today. Occasionally he taps the stone lightly against his palm, but without focus or intention. It is more like a habit than an action. His attention is outward now, drawn to the landscape itself rather than the object he carries. You follow his gaze for a moment. He's watching movement in the grass, not animals, just wind patterns shifting through different heights of vegetation. A subtle detail, but he seems interested in it. Another perspective found in cognitive anthropology suggests that early human perception was likely shaped by constant environmental monitoring. Sensitivity to small changes in sound, movement, and texture would have provided survival advantages, especially in open landscapes where threats and opportunities were not always visible. As you walk, the terrain begins to change again. The grass becomes thinner, the soil slightly drier, small stones appear more frequently, scattered across the ground like fragments of older landscapes. The group slows slightly as they approach a shallow rise. From the top, the view extends farther than before, and that is when you see them, not immediately close, not threatening, just present. Another group of humans, distant across the open land, partially visible between patches of grass and light. They are not moving quickly, they are not approaching, they are simply there. The group you are with stops. Almost at the same moment, no signal is needed, the change in posture happens collectively. Bodies still, heads raised, attention focused. There is a long silence, not empty, but full of interpretation. Distance becomes meaning, movement becomes information, presence becomes question. One interesting detail often discussed in studies of prehistoric encounters is that initial contact between separate human groups was likely governed by caution and visual assessment rather than immediate interaction. Factors such as distance, group size, and body language would have determined whether contact progressed or remained passive observation. You feel the tension, but it is controlled. Not fear, not aggression. Something more subtle. Evaluation. The other group remains still as well. They appear to be watching, observing, measuring. Both sides are reading each other without moving closer. The boy beside you grips the flint slightly tighter again, not as before, less instinctive now, more aware. You notice how the group you're with subtly adjusts spacing, not forming a defensive stance, but creating balance, a quiet arrangement that communicates stability rather than threat. Time feels stretched in this moment, longer than it should be. Then, slowly, a change occurs in the distant group, a small shift in position. One person steps slightly back, another turns their body at an angle. The alignment changes, not retreat, not advance, just adjustment. Your group responds in a similar way, a mirror movement, subtle, careful. The tension does not disappear, but it becomes less concentrated, more distributed, and then, gradually, both groups begin to move again, not toward each other, not away in panic, but along separate paths that diverge gently across the landscape, a controlled separation shaped by mutual awareness. You continue walking. The other group fades slowly into distance, becoming less distinct as grass and light obscure them again. No words were exchanged, but something happened. Recognition, acknowledgement, a shared understanding of coexistence. Another detail often highlighted in ethnographic studies is that many traditional societies treat encounters with unfamiliar groups not as inherently hostile, but as situations requiring careful interpretation. Outcomes vary widely depending on context, resource availability, and prior experience. As the distance grows, the valley feels open again. The group resumes normal pace. Attention loosens slightly. Breathing deepens. The boy with the flint relaxes his grip once more. The object returns to a passive presence in his hand. You walk onward together, carrying the memory of the encounter not as an event of conflict, but as a brief intersection of parallel paths. Two groups, one landscape, separate directions, shared world. The land continues to unfold ahead of you, wide and uncertain, shaped by movement and perception rather than boundaries. And as you move forward, you begin to understand something quietly fundamental about this existence. The world is not divided as clearly as it seems. It is shared in layers, sometimes briefly revealed, then gently separated again. The landscape begins to feel different as the day moves toward its later hours, not because it has changed dramatically, but because your awareness of it has deepened. The same grass, the same wind, the same scattered stones now appear with more meaning than they did before. You notice patterns where earlier there was only terrain. The group walks at a steady pace across open ground, no urgency, no hesitation, just continuous movement shaped by shared direction. You begin to sense that the earlier encounter with the other group still lingers quietly in everyone's awareness, not as tension, but as background understanding, a reminder that the world is not empty, and that other lives move through it with similar needs and uncertainties. Excavations across multiple prehistoric sites suggest that human groups often shared broad landscapes without fixed territorial boundaries in the modern sense. Movement was flexible, shaped by seasonal resources, environmental conditions, and social relationships that could vary widely over time. You walk beside the boy with the flint. He is quieter than before, not distracted, just observant. His eyes move across the ground and then toward the horizon, then back to the group. He seems to be noticing not just objects, but relationships between movement, distance, and presence. The flint rests loosely in his hand. It no longer feels like something separate from him, more like an extension of attention. Ahead, the terrain rises gently. The group slows as they approach the slope. Wind becomes slightly stronger here, moving across the hilltop and flattening patches of grass in shifting patterns. From this elevation, the valley behind you becomes partially visible again, stretching back into distance like a fading memory. Someone pauses at the top. The others follow, and as you reach the higher ground, something subtle happens in the group's collective focus. Attention expands outward, not toward a single point, but across the wider landscape. One widely supported interpretation in anthropological research is that elevated viewpoints played an important role in early human navigation and environmental assessment. High ground offered visibility for tracking movement, identifying resources, and understanding broader spatial relationships within a territory. You stand at the ridge. The wind is cooler here. It carries faint scents from far away, mixing dry grass with something earthy and distant. The group does not immediately move forward. Instead, they observe. The world opens in front of you, not just distance, but possibility. From here, you can see multiple layers of terrain, valleys, slopes, patches of forest, and open stretches of grassland that shift color slightly under changing light. Everything feels interconnected, as if the land is one continuous system rather than separate pieces. The boy beside you looks outward. He does not speak, but his posture changes slightly. More upright, more attentive, a small shift that suggests recognition of scale, of distance, of how far movement can extend. Another perspective found in cognitive archaeology suggests that early human spatial awareness likely developed through repeated travel and observation of large landscapes. Memory of routes, landmarks, and environmental transitions would have formed a mental map shaped by experience rather than symbols. You begin to understand this as you look across the valley. Nothing is labelled, yet everything is known in some way. Not precisely, but relationally. The group slowly begins to move along the ridge, careful, measured. The ground here is uneven in places, with small stones embedded in dry soil. Each step requires attention, but not hesitation. Movement continues. Then, something shifts again in the distance. A subtle change in the horizon line. Not immediate, not sharp, but noticeable once you're aware of it. Another presence, faint, far away, not the same group as before, or perhaps the same but at a different point in time and space. It is impossible to tell with certainty from this distance. The group stops once more. Observation returns. Silence deepens. You feel how quickly attention can gather in these moments, how entire groups can shift from movement to stillness without instruction. Bodies line again, eyes focus, breathing slows slightly. Then, after a long pause, the distant presence does not approach. It continues moving laterally across the landscape until it fades behind uneven terrain and grass. No interaction occurs, but awareness remains. A lesser-known detail from ethnographic observation of traditional societies is that repeated distant sightings of other groups often form part of a broader understanding of shared territory without requiring direct contact. Presence alone can be sufficient information. The group resumes walking. The ridge continues forward in a gentle curve. The boy with the flint taps it once lightly against his palm, then stops again. He is no longer focused on the object itself, but on the rhythm of movement around him. You notice how the group adjusts pace slightly based on terrain, light, and distance from the ridge edge. These small changes happen without discussion, emerging from shared perception. Another interesting observation from archaeological interpretation is that early human groups likely developed complex environmental reading skills, not only for survival but also for efficient movement through large and variable landscapes. Navigation was not linear but adaptive, constantly responding to immediate sensory input. You continue forward. The wind remains steady. The light begins to soften again as the day gradually moves toward evening. The ridge slowly lowers ahead, suggesting descent back into a valley or basin beyond. The group does not rush. There's no urgency to reach a destination, only continuation, step by step, together. And as you move along the ridge, you begin to feel something quiet but significant settling in your understanding of this world. It is not only a place of survival, it is a place of constant awareness, of distance, of others, of movement, of shared presence across vast open land. Even when groups do not meet directly, they still shape each other's understanding of the world simply by existing within it. And in that realization, the landscape feels even larger than before. The ridge finally begins to slope downward as the light shifts into the soft tones of late afternoon. The wind is calmer here, less sharp than it was at the higher ground. Grass bends gently around your legs as you descend, and the soil becomes slightly softer underfoot. The group moves in a quiet, steady flow, no longer pausing as often, but still attentive to the land around them. Everything feels like it is easing toward closure, not an ending, just a transition. You notice how tiredness settles into the group in a different way than earlier in the day. It is not exhaustion that stops movement, but a gradual reduction of alertness, as if the world itself is becoming less demanding for a while. One widely supported interpretation in archaeological and anthropological research is that prehistoric daily cycles were strongly influenced by environmental light patterns, with activity naturally slowing as daylight faded. Without artificial illumination, movement, decision-making, and social interaction all tended to concentrate around periods of natural visibility. You walk at the center of the group. The boy with the flint remains beside you. He is quieter now, holding the stone loosely, almost absent-mindedly. It has become part of his rhythm of walking rather than an object of focus. Every so often, he glances at the ground, then forward, then at the others, as if quietly checking how everything fits together. Ahead, the valley opens again, wider, gentler, more sheltered. It feels like a place suitable for rest. Even before the group decides anything formally, that recognition spreads without words. People begin to slow naturally, their attention shifting from navigation to preparation for stopping. Excavations at multiple prehistoric sites suggest that temporary camps were often chosen based on a combination of shelter, water access, and visibility. These locations were not permanent settlements, but recurring points within broader movement patterns used when conditions were favorable. The group begins to settle, not all at once, but gradually. Someone identifies a sheltered area near scattered trees. Another checks the ground for dryness. Another looks toward the fading light, judging how much time remains before full dusk. A fire is prepared. Tools are set down. Children move closer to adults. The rhythm of arrival is familiar now, even to you. It no longer feels like something being organized. It feels like something being remembered by the group as a whole. You sit near the forming fire circle. The boy places his flint beside him carefully. He does not hold it anymore, just leaves it there, as if acknowledging it does not need to be carried constantly to remain important. A faint glow begins to rise as the fire is rebuilt. Smoke drifts upward in thin lines, carried gently by the wind. The smell of burning wood returns, mixing with earth and grass. Faces begin to reappear in the growing light, calmer now, less focused, more settled. Another layer of evidence from archaeological studies indicates that fire sites were often central to repeated group activity, serving not only for warmth and cooking but also as focal points for social interaction, communication, and rest. These locations often show long-term use patterns across generations. You watch as people begin the slow transition into evening routines. Food is shared, tools are adjusted, sleeping places are chosen. Everything happens in soft coordination, without urgency or confusion. The sky above deepens gradually. colour fading from pale gold to cooler blue. The first stars begin to appear again, not many at first, then more, until the sky feels full once again. The boy leans slightly closer to you without speaking. His presence feels steady, familiar now in a way that did not exist at the beginning of this journey. Around the fire, someone begins to speak again. Not a long story this time. Just a few quiet words that ripple through the group in low tones. A reminder, a reflection, perhaps a simple observation about the day. The exact meaning is not fully clear, but the tone is calm, grounded. You understand it even without translation. The group listens briefly, then settles further. Silence returns, but it is not empty. It is full of shared understanding. You look around the circle. These people are not strangers anymore in the way they once were. They are part of a pattern you have moved with, walked with, observed, and slowly begun to understand. Another interesting perspective from cognitive archaeology suggests that early human consciousness may have been shaped less by isolated individual thought and more by continuous participation in group awareness. Identity and understanding were formed through shared experience rather than separation. The fire crackles softly. The night settles in once more. The boy closes his eyes. The flint rests beside him. The group becomes still. And as the final glow of the fire reflects across faces one last time, the valley around you fades into darkness, leaving only warmth, breath, and the quiet presence of others nearby. The journey does not truly end. It simply becomes part of memory now, carried forward, inside you, inside them, inside the long human story that continues beyond this single night. Then the darkness softens, and sleep arrives. Sweet dreams,